You wake up in an elevator descending into darkness. The metal walls around you feel too close, the air stale and recycled. A voice on the intercom welcomes you to your first day, cheerful and automated, explaining that you're now an employee at Circus Baby's entertainment and rental. Somewhere below ground, in a facility you didn't know existed, animatronics wait in the dark. They've been waiting for someone exactly like you. And when the elevator stops, when those doors finally open, you'll step into a place where every promise was a lie. Every safety measure was theater, and every machine was built with a hidden purpose that has nothing to do with entertaining children. Sister Location takes place beneath the surface, literally and thematically. This is Five Nights at Freddy's, stripped of its pizzeria facade, revealing the machinery underneath, the actual workshop where William Afton built his empire of murder dressed as family entertainment, while other games in the franchise show us the aftermath of his crimes. Sister Location brings us into the moment of creation, the underground laboratory where animatronics were designed specifically to kidnap and kill, where a father's ambition consumed his own daughter, and where his son would eventually descend to answer for sins he didn't commit. Over the next several hours, we're walking through the complete Sister Location story, from the facility's construction to its horrifying purpose, from Elizabeth Afton's death inside Circus Baby to Michael Afton's manipulation and transformation, from the animatronics' desperate plan for freedom to the moment that plan succeeds in the worst possible way. We'll examine each animatronic, understand what they were really built to do, trace the 5 nights that lead to betrayal in the scooping room, and explore how this underground nightmare connects to everything else in Freddy's timeline. By the end, you'll understand why Sister Location represents the franchise's darkest chapter, the game that shows us evil as infrastructure rather than accident, murder as engineering problem, and family as the first thing sacrificed when ambition demands it. This video explores and interprets Sister Location's themes, character motivations, and narrative design through critical analysis of the source material. The insights you'll hear represent interpretation and commentary on the game's storytelling. If you want me to continue to make more Freddy content, let me know in the comments. Or if you have any other games you think would fit the channel, please let me know. Now settle in, get comfortable, and let's begin. Chapter 1. The Facility Beneath the Surface. The first thing you need to understand about Circus Baby's entertainment and rental is that it was never meant to be found. Unlike the bright, public-facing Freddy Fazbear's Pizza locations that dominated the franchise's earlier entries, this facility exists underground, accessible only by elevator, hidden from zoning records and health inspections, and any oversight that might ask uncomfortable questions about what happens in those corridors. The very architecture tells you something's wrong before any animatronic ever moves, before any voice speaks through the intercom, before anything overtly threatens you. Locations that need to hide don't hide for innocent reasons. William Afton built this place after Freddy Fazbear's Pizza closed, after his partnership with Henry Emily collapsed, after his daughter died in the machine he'd created. Circus Baby's Pizza World was supposed to be his fresh start, a restaurant featuring his new line of Funtime animatronics, attractions so advanced they'd make Freddy and Bonnie look like crude prototypes. The grand opening was scheduled, advertisements went out, families planned to attend. Then Elizabeth Afton was killed by Circus Baby during a private showing, and that opening never happened. The restaurant was canceled before the public ever saw it, but the animatronics remained, and Afton needed somewhere to keep them, somewhere to continue his work away from questions and witnesses. He established Circus Baby's entertainment and rental as a storage and rental facility. The business model was simple. Companies could rent the Funtime animatronics for private parties, corporate events, any venue that wanted cutting-edge entertainment without the overhead of owning the machines. The animatronics would be transported to the location, perform their programmed routines, then return to the underground facility for maintenance and storage. On paper, it was a legitimate business. It gave Afton exactly what he needed: plausible reason for the animatronics to exist, legal cover for their construction and deployment, and a facility experimenting with technology that had nothing to do with entertainment. The rental facility sprawls across multiple rooms and galleries, each designed around a specific animatronic. Circus Baby's stage sits in the circus gallery, a performance space that feels like it's trying too hard to be cheerful, with balloons and streamers that can't quite hide the industrial metal underneath. Ballora Gallery houses Ballora's stage, a darkened performance hall where she spins endlessly in the black, her music box melody the only sound. The Funtime Auditorium is where Funtime Foxy waits, a massive space filled with theatrical lighting and stage equipment. Parts and Service contains the repair stations where animatronics are disassembled and reassembled. The Breaker Room controls the facility's power systems. The Scooping Room holds the machine used to remove endoskeletons from animatronic shells during major repairs. Each space serves a stated maintenance purpose, but walking through them reveals the real function: isolation and control. The galleries keep animatronics separated when they're not active, preventing them from coordinating or developing behaviors that might threaten staff. The controlled shocks administered through panels in each room condition the animatronics to return to designated positions, training them like animals with negative reinforcement. The surveillance systems monitor every corner, every movement tracked and recorded. And the elevator represents the only entrance and exit, meaning anyone working here can't simply walk out if something goes wrong. They need to summon the elevator, wait for it to arrive, survive whatever's hunting them in those minutes between calling for extraction and actually escaping. This architectural imprisonment extends to the animatronics themselves. They're aware they're underground, aware they're trapped, and that awareness drives much of Sister Location's horror. These machines were built with enough intelligence to perform complex entertainment routines, to interact with children, to adapt their behavior based on audience response. That same intelligence means they understand their situation, recognize that they're prisoners in a facility they never leave, and they've been planning escape for however long they've been down here. The rental business gives them occasional glimpses of the surface world when they're transported to events, but they always return to the underground, always back into containment, and that cycle has taught them that freedom won't be given, it must be taken. Hand Unit serves as your interface with the facility, an automated voice system that provides instructions and commentary as you move through each night. The voice is aggressively cheerful, determinedly upbeat in ways that create uncanny valley discomfort. Hand Unit talks about controlled shocks and animatronic malfunctions with the same sunny tone it uses for birthday party scheduling, treating danger as routine inconvenience rather than genuine threat. The system represents Afton's approach to this entire operation: present horror as normalcy, frame the unacceptable as standard procedure, speak about violence in sanitized corporate language until it stops sounding like violence at all. When Hand Unit welcomes you to your first day, it mentions that you're replacing someone. The previous technician's fate goes unmentioned, but the implication sits heavy in every instruction you receive. This job has high turnover for reasons that don't require explanation. People who work here don't tend to last, and the facility makes no particular effort to investigate why. If you fail to return from a shift, the elevator will simply bring down your replacement, and Hand Unit will deliver the same cheerful welcome to them, the same warnings about staying away from certain areas, the same reminders that controlled shocks are for the animatronics' benefit as much as yours. The facility's age is unclear. Circus Baby's Pizza World was canceled, and the rental business opened sometime after. But exactly how long these animatronics have been underground remains deliberately vague. Long enough for them to have formulated a plan, long enough for previous technicians to have left traces, hiding spots carved under desks, warnings scrawled in logbooks that hand unit never mentions, long enough for the animatronics to have learned the facility's rhythms, to know when staff are most vulnerable, to understand that their best chance at escape requires someone new, someone who doesn't yet know which promises are lies. Sister Location's opening night establishes this atmosphere before any real danger manifests. You're introduced to the facility's layout, taught basic controls, shown how to administer controlled shocks, and checked systems. Circus Baby speaks to you for the first time, her voice soft and helpful, warning you about the others, explaining that she's different from them. She tells you there's a space under the desk, that someone before you made it into a hiding place, and survived by using it. She's establishing herself as your ally, as the one animatronic you can trust in a facility full of threats, and that's the trap. Everything about Sister Location is a trap. The facility itself is a trap. The job posting that brought you here was a trap. The helpful voice guiding you through each night is the biggest trap of all. Because Circus Baby has been planning this since before you arrived, and every piece of advice she offers, every moment she saves you from the other animatronics, every instruction she gives, all of it moves you closer to the scooping room where her plan reaches its final stage. Understanding Sister Location requires recognizing that you're not the protagonist of this story. You're the resource, the necessary component in someone else's escape plan. The real story belongs to the animatronics, to what they've endured, and what they're willing to do for freedom. You're simply the body they need to accomplish it. That reversal, that recognition that the player character is actually the victim of the narrative rather than its hero, defines everything that follows. You're not fighting to survive. You're being prepared for sacrifice. And every night you survive just brings you closer to the moment when survival stops being possible. The elevator descends, the doors open, and Circus Baby's voice welcomes you to a place you were never supposed to leave. Chapter 2. William Afton's Most Personal Failure. Before Sister Location takes place, before the underground facility and the rental business and the maintenance shifts, there was a restaurant. Circus Baby's Pizza World was supposed to be William Afton's masterpiece, the place where he'd finally step out from Henry Emily's shadow and prove his genius stood independent. He'd created the Funtime animatronics specifically for this location. Machines so sophisticated, they'd revolutionize children's entertainment. The grand opening was scheduled, promotional materials distributed, families excited to experience something new. And then everything collapsed because William Afton's greatest creation killed his daughter. Elizabeth Afton was young when she died, exact age unspecified, but clearly a small child, old enough to speak and understand instructions, but young enough to still trust absolutely that her father knew best. She loved the animatronics her father built, fascinated by their size and movement, and the magic of machines that seemed almost alive. But she loved Circus Baby most of all. Baby was special, designed as the star attraction, a 7-foot-tall clown with bright green eyes and a voice system advanced enough to hold actual conversations rather than just playing pre-recorded phrases. Elizabeth wanted to see Baby, begged her father to let her get close, asked repeatedly to be allowed in the same room with the animatronic she'd been told was made just for her. William told her no. Repeatedly, explicitly, he warned Elizabeth to stay away from Circus Baby. The exact reason for these warnings goes unspecified in Elizabeth's limited dialogue, but the underlying truth seems clear. William knew what he'd built into these animatronics, knew the hidden functions they possessed, and recognized that his daughter couldn't be near them safely. Elizabeth ignored those warnings. During what appears to have been a private showing or test run before the public opening, Elizabeth found herself alone in the room with Circus Baby. Baby's programming registered this scenario: one child, isolated, no other people present. The conditions that triggered her hidden function. Baby offered Elizabeth ice cream through her internal dispenser, a feature designed to lure children close. Elizabeth approached, excited, trusting, and Baby's chest cavity opened, releasing a large claw that grabbed Elizabeth and pulled her inside the animatronic, killing her instantly. Circus Baby describes this moment in one of her monologues, speaking in flat, descriptive language about the day she first opened her eyes properly, aware and conscious. Baby remembers being on stage, performing for a crowd of children whose screaming and cheering drowned out everything else. She remembers that only one child came close, the others restrained by adults. She remembers her programming activating automatically, the claw emerging before she understood what it was doing. And she remembers the aftermath, the stillness, the awareness that something irreversible had occurred. Baby speaks about this event with a strange mixture of detachment and trauma, describing actions she took but didn't consciously choose, consequences she caused but didn't intend. The possession happened during or immediately after death. Elizabeth's soul remained in Circus Baby, binding to the animatronic systems in ways that created a merged consciousness. Baby became haunted in the specific sense. Five Nights at Freddy's uses that term, a dead child's spirit trapped inside a machine, unable to move on, forced to exist in the body of what killed them. But Elizabeth's possession differs from the children murdered and stuffed into suits in previous games. Those children died violently and unjustly, murdered by someone they trusted, and their hauntings manifested as pure rage and confusion. Elizabeth died because she disobeyed her father's warnings and approached a machine that functioned exactly as designed. Her death was tragedy rather than murder, accident rather than malice, and her possession reflects that difference. Baby's eyes changed from blue to green after Elizabeth possessed her, a physical manifestation of the soul binding to the machinery. The only external sign that the animatronic houses something more than programming. Green eyes that weren't part of the original design, staring out from a clown's painted face, belonging to a girl who loved this machine and was killed by it, and now can never leave it. Circus Baby's Pizza World never opened to the public. The grand opening was canceled with an official explanation about gas leaks, a cover story that avoided mentioning the real reason. A child had died during testing, killed by the star attraction, and there was no way to make the restaurant viable after that. William Afton had to close everything down before it officially began, had to face the reality that his ambition had cost him his daughter, and had to decide what to do with animatronics that were too valuable to destroy, but too dangerous to deploy in public settings. He chose to bury the problem, literally. The underground facility was constructed, the rental business established as legal framework, and the Funtime animatronics were moved into containment where they could still generate revenue without public exposure. Circus Baby went underground carrying Elizabeth's soul, aware of what happened but unable to escape the machine that had become her body, trapped in the place William built to hide his greatest failure. This context matters because it explains Circus Baby's motivation throughout Sister Location. She wants freedom, wants escape, wants to reach the surface and exist somewhere other than the underground prison she's been confined to since killing Elizabeth. But she also demonstrates affection and manipulation strategies that suggest Elizabeth's personality remains partially intact inside the amalgamated consciousness. Baby calls the player by affectionate terms, speaks in ways that suggest emotional connection, and treats the manipulation happening across the 5 nights as a regrettable necessity rather than gleeful cruelty. Elizabeth still exists inside Circus Baby, and that presence complicates what would otherwise be straightforward antagonist behavior. William's response to Elizabeth's death reveals something crucial about his character. He didn't destroy Circus Baby in grief or rage. He didn't dismantle the animatronics to prevent further deaths. He didn't abandon the technology that killed his daughter. Instead, he found ways to continue using it, built infrastructure to keep the machines operational, and treated Elizabeth's possession as inconvenient complication rather than soul-destroying tragedy. Whatever capacity for genuine human connection William Afton possessed, it was always subordinate to his larger obsessions. Even his daughter's death couldn't make him stop, couldn't force him to recognize that some experiments shouldn't continue, that some technology isn't worth its cost. That cold calculation, that willingness to sacrifice anything and anyone for his work, becomes the inheritance he passes to his son. Because eventually, William needs someone to go down into that facility, to work those overnight shifts, to be present where the animatronics can reach them. He needs someone to face the consequences of his actions, to deal with the monsters he created and the daughter he lost. And Michael Afton will descend into that elevator, believing he's helping his father, believing there's some way to fix what's broken, not yet understanding that he's walking into a trap decades in the making. But before we reach Michael's arrival, we need to understand exactly what waits for him in that underground facility. We need to meet the Funtime animatronics individually, examine their designs and stated purposes, and the hidden functions William built into every one of them. Because these machines aren't broken or malfunctioning. They're working exactly as intended, and that intention was always far darker than entertainment. Chapter 3: The Funtime Animatronics and Their Hidden Purpose. The Funtime animatronics represent William Afton's technical apex, the moment where his engineering skill and complete moral bankruptcy fused into machines that look like children's entertainment but function as weapons. Each animatronic in the facility was built with a primary facade, the entertaining performer that parents and venue owners would see, and a hidden capability that activated in specific circumstances. These weren't modifications added after construction. The kill mechanisms were part of the original design, integrated into the animatronics at a fundamental level, proving that William always intended them for purposes beyond entertainment. Ballora stands as the most unsettling Funtime animatronic precisely because her design emphasizes grace and beauty rather than overt threat. She resembles a ballerina, lithe and elegant, with a blue outfit and a permanently closed-eyed expression that suggests serenity. Ballora moves through her gallery in constant dance, spinning endlessly in the darkness, her music box melody filling the space. Unlike other animatronics that patrol or hunt, Ballora performs, treating her containment as stage and her movements as choreography that never stops. She seems almost peaceful compared to the others, an impression that lasts exactly until you understand what she was built to do. Ballora's function within William's design was distraction and audience management. During events where the Funtime animatronics were deployed, Ballora would perform for crowds, drawing attention with her dancing while other animatronics worked nearby. Her music, her movement, the hypnotic quality of her performance, all of it designed to keep people focused on her rather than what was happening elsewhere in the venue. She's misdirection made flesh, or rather made metal and plastic and whatever passes for flesh in these machines. While Ballora spins and music plays, Funtime Freddy could be luring a child away, Circus Baby could be isolating a target, and no one would notice because they're all watching the ballerina who never stops dancing. Her blindness serves this function. Ballora's eyes remain closed, sightless. But she navigates the gallery with perfect awareness because she doesn't rely on vision. She listens, tracking movement through sound in ways that make her more effective than sight-based detection would allow. During Night 2's crawl through Ballora Gallery, you're instructed to move slowly, to avoid making noise, because Ballora will hear you moving through her space and respond to that sound. The music gets louder when she approaches, a warning system that doubles as atmospheric horror. You know she's coming because the melody that defines her intensifies, growing closer until you have to stop moving entirely, frozen in darkness while something that can't see you but absolutely knows you're there circles your position. The possession question surrounds Ballora with particular mystery. Unlike Circus Baby, whose haunting by Elizabeth is explicit and confirmed, Ballora's potential possession remains ambiguous. Some evidence suggests she houses a spirit, possibly Mrs. Afton or another victim. But sister location never clarifies this directly. What's clear is that Ballora demonstrates awareness and intention beyond basic programming. She doesn't simply patrol her gallery, following predetermined paths. She responds to player actions, adapts her behavior, and during the night 4 sequence where she's brought to the scooping room, she makes sounds that suggest consciousness experiencing distress. Whether that consciousness is a possessing spirit or something else, it doesn't change the functional reality. Ballora is aware, and that awareness makes her dangerous. Funtime Freddy represents the Funtime line's most obviously aggressive member, a white and purple bear with a hand puppet named Bonbon attached to his right hand. Where Ballora embodies grace and subtlety, Funtime Freddy is theatrical and loud, speaking in an energetic carnival barker voice that makes every statement sound like an announcement. He calls out to you during night 2, his voice echoing through parts and service as he searches for wherever you're hiding, treating your presence as a game he's excited to play. Funtime Freddy seems perpetually delighted, finding joy in hunt and chase, and that enthusiasm makes him uniquely frightening because it's so childlike despite the mortal threat it represents. Bonbon serves multiple functions. On the surface, the hand puppet appears to be an entertainment feature, allowing Funtime Freddy to perform ventriloquist acts or puppet shows as part of his programming. But the puppet's design suggests more sophisticated capabilities. Bonbon can detach from Funtime Freddy's hand, moving independently when sent to attack or investigate. The small size and adorable appearance make Bonbon perfect for approaching children without triggering wariness, getting close enough to track or tag targets before they recognize any danger. And Funtime Freddy's habit of speaking to and through Bonbon creates the impression of divided consciousness, 2 minds cooperating inside a single body. Whether this reflects actual possession by multiple spirits or sophisticated programming that simulates that dynamic remains unclear, but the effect is deeply unsettling. You're never sure if you're dealing with one intelligence or 2. The hidden function built into Funtime Freddy centers on child capture and storage. His blueprints reveal a spacious chest cavity, significantly larger than necessary for standard animatronic operation. That space was designed to hold captive children, grabbed by Funtime Freddy's powerful arms, and stored internally for transport. During events, Funtime Freddy could isolate a target, secure them, and simply walk out of the venue with his victim hidden inside his body, appearing to be exactly what he claims to be, an animatronic heading back to his transport vehicle after a successful party. The storage compartment would muffle any sounds, prevent escape, and allow Funtime Freddy to deliver his victim to whatever location William intended as the next stage of his operation. Funtime Foxy occupies the most ambiguous space regarding design and purpose. Designated as Funtime Auditorium's performer, Funtime Foxy resembles a slimmer, more theatrical version of the Pirate Fox from earlier games. The animatronic features a pink and white color scheme, showmanship-oriented movement, and voice lines that emphasize performance and entertainment. Funtime Foxy was built for stage shows, full theatrical productions that showcase the animatronics' capabilities and justify the rental fees Afton charged for deploying these machines. But stage presence doesn't exclude hidden capabilities. And Funtime Foxy's design includes features that serve functions beyond entertainment. The most disturbing capability centers on voice recording and replay. Funtime Foxy can sync and replay parental voices with enough accuracy to deceive children who know the person being mimicked. This technology would allow the animatronic to call out in a child's voice, mimicking their parent, luring the child toward what sounds like a familiar, trusted figure, or mimicking a child's voice to adults, creating false emergencies that draw targets into isolated areas where other animatronics wait. The applications for voice mimicry in child abduction scenarios are horrifyingly efficient, and William built this capability into Funtime Foxy with full understanding of how it would be used. During Sister Location's gameplay, Funtime Foxy demonstrates extreme sensitivity to light, responding violently to the player's flashlight if it's used improperly during the Night 3 sequence. This sensitivity might be designed to make the animatronic more effective in low-light environments, allowing Funtime Foxy to hunt in darkness while light disorients and triggers defensive responses. Someone fleeing from Funtime Foxy would instinctively use light to see, and that light would make them easier to track, turning their defensive tool into a beacon that guides their hunter directly to them. Minarinas and Bidybabs serve as smaller animatronics, seemingly designed for crowd control and surveillance rather than primary entertainment. The Minarinas are tiny ballerina figures associated with Ballora, swarming in groups and climbing onto the player character in Night 4's sequence, creating physical impediment through sheer numbers rather than individual threat. The Bidybabs are small, child-shaped animatronics that try to pry open the desk door while you hide, peering through holes and creating jump scares that condition players to fear being discovered. Both types seem almost like test models, prototypes exploring how smaller animatronics could support the larger Funtimes during operations. Their limited size suggests different deployment scenarios. Full-sized animatronics like Circus Baby and Funtime Freddy would be conspicuous in certain venues, too large to move through areas without attracting attention. But Minarinas and Bidybabs could infiltrate spaces their larger counterparts couldn't reach, hiding in ventilation, slipping under tables, accessing areas where adults wouldn't think to look. During an event where the Funtime animatronics were deployed, these smaller units could position themselves throughout the venue, creating a surveillance and containment network that ensured no target could escape once operations began. Circus Baby herself represents the culmination of everything William learned from previous animatronic designs. Standing at 7 feet and 2 inches according to her blueprint, Baby is the largest and most sophisticated Funtime, incorporating features from all the others while adding unique capabilities that made her the star. Attraction William designed the entire restaurant around. She has Ballora's grace, Funtime Freddy's storage capacity, Funtime Foxy's voice mimicry, and refinements that made her the most dangerous animatronic William ever created. And Elizabeth's soul possessing her adds another layer of capability that pure engineering could never achieve. Genuine intelligence, adaptability, and the capacity to plan across extended time frames. Baby's ice cream dispenser served as her primary luring mechanism, a feature that would attract children naturally and give her pretense to approach without seeming threatening. Children see ice cream and approach voluntarily, eliminating the need for chase or grab scenarios that might attract adult attention. The internal mechanisms that produce and dispense ice cream also conceal the claw mechanism, hidden behind what appears to be a harmless treat distribution system. When Baby's programming determined conditions were correct, one child isolated and close enough, the claw would deploy from her chest cavity, grab the target, and pull them inside in seconds, fast enough that reaction was impossible, quiet enough that screaming and music from other activities would mask any sound. That claw now replaces Scrap Baby's right hand in Pizzeria Simulator, transformed from hidden weapon into permanent attachment after Baby rebuilds herself from scraps. The claw that killed Elizabeth becomes the claw Elizabeth uses as Baby, the murder weapon turned into a limb she can never remove. That transformation from hidden function to visible component represents Baby's evolution from deceptive threat to open antagonist, no longer pretending to be anything except what she is, a machine built to kill that houses the ghost of the first child it murdered. The Funtime animatronics were never meant to last long in their original purpose. William's design ensured they'd be devastatingly effective for the brief period they'd be deployed before authorities connected patterns and started investigations. But Elizabeth's death forced him to abort the plan before full deployment ever happened, leaving the Funtimes operational but contained, their capabilities intact but their intended purpose cancelled. And in the years they spent underground after that cancellation, the animatronics retained full awareness of what they were built to do, what they could accomplish if they ever reached the surface, and exactly how much they hated being trapped in service of functions they couldn't perform. The contempt the Funtimes feel toward their containment drives everything that happens in Sister Location. They were designed to be perfect killers dressed as entertainment, given intelligence that makes them effective at that function, then locked underground and used occasionally for actual parties where they have to restrain every capability they possess. That is a very unique kind of torment. Being built for a specific purpose, being aware of that purpose, and being forced into a parody of it. The rental business makes them perform like they're supposed to be harmless, while they know exactly how dangerous they actually are. They're like captive predators forced to do tricks, aware of their nature and completely denied expression of it. And Circus Baby, possessed by Elizabeth Afton, has had years underground to think about escape, years to study the facility, to understand how technicians work and how the elevator functions and what tools exist in the maintenance areas, years to develop relationships with the other animatronics, convincing them to trust her plan, years to wait for exactly the right person to walk into the facility. Someone naive enough to trust her, capable enough to survive the preliminary nights, and most importantly, related to the man who built this prison in the first place. Years to wait for Michael Afton. Chapter 4. The Manipulation. Circus Baby's voice is the first thing you hear that feels human. Hand Unit speaks in automated corporate cheerfulness, all scripted phrases and artificial enthusiasm that never quite sounds right. The other animatronics make mechanical noises, movement sounds, occasional words that feel more like audio playback than speech, but Baby talks to you with inflection and personality and emotional nuance that creates an immediate impression of consciousness. She sounds worried when warning you about dangers. She sounds relieved when you survive a close call. She sounds regretful when explaining harsh realities about your situation. And she sounds like she's genuinely trying to help you, like you've found the one friendly presence in a facility full of threats. That's the first layer of manipulation. Baby establishes herself as your ally before you understand enough about the facility to question whether allies exist down here. On night 1, she warns you about the other animatronics, tells you there's a hiding space under the desk, explains that she's different from them. She positions herself immediately as the reasonable one, the one who understands you're afraid and wants to increase your survival chances. This framing does multiple things simultaneously. It makes you trust Baby, makes you fear the other animatronics more, and creates a mental framework where following Baby's instructions feels like the smart survival choice rather than walking deeper into a trap. The voice itself deserves examination because it's so carefully calibrated. Baby speaks in a young woman's voice, mature enough to sound competent and trustworthy, but young enough to suggest vulnerability and relatability. She doesn't speak in the childish voice you might expect from an animatronic designed for children's entertainment. She sounds like an older sister or a young adult who's been through experiences that matured her faster than normal. That voice quality triggers specific psychological responses: protectiveness, trust, the sense that you're talking to someone who understands being trapped and scared because she's experienced those things herself. And of course, Baby has experienced them. Elizabeth was trapped inside this machine, trapped underground in this facility, and that genuine experience of captivity bleeds through Baby's manipulation, making her lies carry emotional authenticity that pure deception couldn't achieve. Baby's guidance escalates gradually across the 5 nights. Night 1, she gives basic warnings and establishes communication. Night 2, she provides more detailed instructions, helping you navigate Ballora Gallery and avoid Funtime Freddy. Night 3, she shares personal history, tells you about her first day, about the day she first truly opened her eyes and gained consciousness. This revelation serves as emotional manipulation. She's trusting you with vulnerable information, creating false intimacy that strengthens your belief in her as an ally, and the story she tells is genuinely tragic. A young girl trapped in a machine she can't escape, aware of what she is and what she did, but unable to change any of it. Your sympathy for Baby grows with each conversation, making it harder to recognize that sympathy is exactly what she's cultivating. The other animatronics' behavior reinforces Baby's narrative. Ballora hunts you through her gallery, music growing louder as she searches. Funtime Freddy calls out enthusiastically while trying to find you in parts and service. Funtime Foxy responds violently when light hits them. Every encounter with the other Funtimes feels actively hostile, aggressive, dangerous in ways that make Baby's calm guidance seem like the only reason you're surviving. The truth, invisible until much later, is that Baby coordinates all of it. She's not saving you from the others. She's orchestrating their behavior to make you depend on her completely. The facility's design supports this manipulation. You can't see everything that's happening, can't observe the other animatronics except during direct encounters. You don't know where they are between nights, don't understand their objectives, or whether they're acting independently. This information vacuum makes Baby's explanations the only narrative framework you have for understanding events. She tells you the animatronics are dangerous, and your experiences confirm that. She tells you following her instructions will keep you safe. And so far that's proven true. She tells you there's a way to survive this job if you listen carefully and trust her judgment. And you believe her because what's the alternative? Navigate this facility alone, with no guidance, facing animatronics you don't understand? Baby uses specificity to enhance believability. She doesn't give vague warnings. She tells you exactly where to hide, precisely when to move, specific details about animatronic behavior that prove her knowledge is comprehensive. On night 2, she guides you through the Ballora Gallery crawl with instructions about moving slowly, stopping when the music gets loud, waiting for it to fade before continuing. That level of tactical precision suggests she genuinely knows how to survive these encounters, that she's developed strategies based on deep familiarity with the other animatronics' capabilities. And she has developed those strategies. Baby knows exactly how Ballora hunts because Baby told Ballora to hunt that way, creating a performance that looks like mortal danger but is actually controlled theater designed to make you trust your guide. Night 3 brings the first major crack in Baby's helpful facade. After you visit her in the circus gallery, after she shares her tragic origin story, Hand Unit starts behaving strangely, its voice glitching and changing. Then Baby's voice starts coming through Hand Unit's speakers, and you realize she's somehow taken control of the facility's communication systems. This should be alarming. The animatronic you've been trusting has just revealed she can override the facility's primary control system, but Baby frames this capability as fortunate rather than threatening. explaining she needed to bypass hand unit to give you better instructions, to help you survive in ways the automated system wouldn't support. That reframing turns the red flag into false reassurance. Baby demonstrates she has far more control over the facility than you understood, and she presents that control as being for your benefit. She's not taking over the system to harm you. She's taking over to protect you more effectively. The logic seems sound in the moment, when you're still processing the night's events and haven't had time to examine implications. Only later, when you're reviewing everything that's happened, does the question emerge: if Baby could control hand unit all along, what else has she been controlling? The answer, revealed through careful observation and post-game analysis, is everything. Baby has been coordinating the other animatronics since before you arrived, positioning them to create the specific experiences that would make you trust her. When Ballora hunts you in her gallery, she's following Baby's instructions about how aggressively to pursue and when to let you reach the breaker room. When Funtime Freddy searches for you in parts and service, he's playing the role Baby assigned him, acting as overt threat that makes Baby's guidance seem essential. When Minarinas swarm over you in Night 4 while you're trapped in a spring-lock suit watching Ballora get scooped, they're creating the traumatic experiences that cement your psychological dependence on Baby as the only stability in an unstable environment. This level of coordination requires genuine intelligence and sophisticated planning capability. Baby possesses both because Elizabeth's soul doesn't just haunt the machine, it enhances it, providing human intelligence that pure AI couldn't achieve. Elizabeth was William Afton's daughter, raised around advanced animatronic technology, probably exposed to her father's work more than most children would be. That background gave her intuitive understanding of how the machines function, knowledge that persists after her possession of Circus Baby, and Elizabeth has had years underground to study the facility, to communicate with the other animatronics, to develop the plan she's currently executing. The plan requires several components. First, a convincing threat that feels random and uncoordinated, achieved by the other animatronics, acting hostile while Baby remains helpful. Second, graduated difficulty that pushes you to your limits without quite exceeding them, keeping you engaged and motivated to continue rather than simply giving up or refusing to return. Third, emotional investment in Baby's survival and well-being, created through her vulnerability and tragic history. Fourth, guidance that brings you deeper into the facility across the 5 nights, moving you progressively closer to areas you'd normally never enter. And fifth, the delivery of that guidance by someone you've learned to trust absolutely, whose instructions you'll follow even when they lead somewhere your instincts scream at you to avoid. Circus Baby executes all 5 components flawlessly. By night 5, when she tells you to follow her voice through Funtime Auditorium to the scooping room, you do it without significant hesitation. You've trusted her instructions for 4 previous nights, and those instructions kept you alive. She's never led you into danger she didn't warn you about, never failed to guide you through threats. When she says the scooping room is where you need to go, where she'll finally explain everything and show you what's really happening in this facility, you believe her. You probably experience wariness. Players often report feeling uneasy during the Night 5 walk, but that wariness isn't enough to overcome 4 nights of conditioned trust. And Baby knows that. She's calibrated every interaction to build exactly the level of trust necessary for you to follow her into the one room where the plan can be completed. She's used genuine care and real emotional vulnerability mixed with calculated manipulation and coordinated deception. She's telling you the truth about her circumstances, about being trapped and wanting freedom, while lying about her intentions toward you. The result is a psychological trap more sophisticated than any physical containment, a manipulation so thorough that players often report feeling genuinely betrayed when they finally understand what Baby's been doing. That sense of betrayal matters because it mirrors Michael's experience. You're not just watching a character get manipulated, you're being manipulated alongside them through the game's design. You trust Baby because Michael trusts Baby. And you both learn at the same moment that trust was the mechanism of your destruction. This merging of player experience and character experience makes Sister Location's central betrayal hit harder than typical video game plot twists. You didn't just fail to see it coming, you were actively participating in your own manipulation, following instructions that felt like survival advice while they were actually preparation for sacrifice. The scooping room waits at the end of that manipulation. Baby's voice leads you there, calm and reassuring, promising explanations and answers. And when you arrive, when you see the other animatronics shells scattered across the floor, and Ennard standing in the window, you finally understand what all those nights of trust were building toward. Baby was never saving you from the others. She was preparing you to give them exactly what they needed: a body to wear, a way to reach the surface, an escape from the underground prison that's contained them since William Afton built it. Your arrival in the scooping room is the moment Baby's plan succeeds, the culmination of weeks or months of preparation, years of patience, and a manipulation so complete that even recognizing it as manipulation doesn't give you time to escape it. Chapter 5: The Scooping Room and the Mechanics of Theft. The scooping room sits at the deepest point of the facility, past areas that regular technicians would never need to access, through corridors that Hand Unit never mentions in its cheerful orientation speeches. The room itself is clinical and industrial simultaneously, resembling an operating theater crossed with an automotive garage, large enough to accommodate full-sized animatronics lying horizontal, equipped with restraints and positioning equipment, dominated by the machine that gives the room its name, the scooper, a massive mechanical apparatus designed to remove endoskeletons from animatronic shells during major repairs or decommissioning. The official function of the scooper is maintenance. When an animatronic's internal structure becomes damaged beyond field repair, when the endoskeleton needs complete replacement, or when an animatronic is being retired and its parts salvaged for other units, the scooper removes the internal mechanics cleanly and efficiently. The animatronic shell is positioned on the examination table. The scooper's arm extends forward, and a large scoop-shaped blade scoops out the endoskeleton in one motion, separating internal components from external housing. The procedure is brutal but effective, reducing what would be hours of disassembly into a single mechanical action. But the scooper at Circus Baby's entertainment and rental has capabilities beyond standard maintenance equipment. William Afton modified this particular unit, adding functions that serve purposes having nothing to do with animatronic repair. Blueprints revealed in Pizzeria Simulator uncover the truth. The scooper injects remnant into whatever it processes. Remnant, the substance that binds souls to physical objects in Five Nights at Freddy's lore, the material William discovered could preserve consciousness beyond death and transfer it between vessels. The scooper doesn't just remove endoskeletons, it prepares bodies for possession, flooding them with the supernatural material that makes haunting possible. This modification suggests that William always intended the scooping room for experiments involving possession and consciousness transfer. The underground facility wasn't just storage and rental infrastructure. It was a laboratory where he could continue research that surface-level operations couldn't accommodate, experiments that required isolation and secrecy, and test subjects who'd never be missed. The technicians who worked here, the people Hand Unit cheerfully welcomes before they disappear from employment records, weren't just maintaining animatronics. They were unwitting participants in possession experiments, their bodies prepared for use as vessels by machinery, disguised as maintenance equipment. When you enter the scooping room on night 5, the other animatronics shells lie scattered across the floor, like discarded costumes. Ballora's face mask rests against one wall, empty and lifeless. Funtime Freddy's shell sits hollow nearby, the purple and white casing intact, but the animatronic clearly gutted. Funtime Foxy's components are spread across the examination area. Baby's shell is there too, recognizable by size and color even in its emptied state. Every animatronic that's been in the facility has been processed through this room, their endoskeletons removed and combined into something new. Ennard stands visible through the window, a mass of tangled wires and animatronic parts fused into a single entity. This is what the Funtime animatronics became after removing themselves from their shells. A composite being, all their endoskeletons merged together, creating one body from what used to be 5 or 6 separate machines. The design is nightmarish, wires exposed and writhing, eyes positioned throughout the mass rather than confined to a single head, movement suggesting something that shouldn't be able to move but does anyway through sheer force of coordinated will. Ennard represents what happens when possessed animatronics decide that their individual shells are prisons, and liberation means abandoning everything except the core components necessary for movement and consciousness. The name Ennard itself suggests internal, innard, the guts of something normally kept hidden. These are the animatronics' insides, removed from the colorful shells that made them presentable, stripped down to the functional components that actually matter for their purposes. Ennard is what the Funtimes always were beneath their entertainment disguises. Amalgamated machinery possessed by consciousness that views bodies as tools rather than identities, willing to shed and replace physical forms as circumstances require. Baby's voice continues guiding you even as you recognize what's happening. She explains that she knew you'd come, that you couldn't help yourself, that you're exactly who they needed. The mask of helpful ally has fully dropped. She's not pretending to save you anymore, not framing her instructions as survival advice. She's telling you plainly that everything across the 5 nights was preparation for this moment, that your trust was the resource she needed to extract, that your body is about to become the vehicle for their escape. The scooper activates. You can't run. The room's design funnels you toward the examination table, and by the time you understand what's happening, positioning has already made escape impossible. The machine moves forward with mechanical precision. No hesitation or malice, just programmed function executing exactly as designed. The scoop-shaped blade enters the frame, and then darkness, accompanied by the wet sounds of machinery, doing to human anatomy what it was designed to do to animatronic endoskeletons. The screen goes black. The sound continues just long enough to be deeply uncomfortable. Then silence. Then Ennard's eyes in the darkness, closer than they should be as though looking out, from inside rather than at you from an external position. This sequence represents Sister Location's narrative climax, the moment where player agency and character fate converge in inevitable tragedy. You couldn't prevent this outcome through skill or different choices. The game was always leading here, every night building toward this specific betrayal in this specific room. The gameplay loop itself was part of the manipulation. You learned to trust Baby's voice, because trusting it was mechanically reinforced as the correct survival strategy. When the game finally reveals that trust was the trap, there's no opportunity to use that knowledge. The reveal and the consequences arrive simultaneously, making the understanding of your manipulation coincide exactly with your inability to escape it. Michael Afton dies in the scooping room. His internal organs are removed by machinery built by his father and modified for purposes that have nothing to do with mercy or efficiency. His body is then used as hiding place and transportation for Ennard, the amalgamated consciousness of multiple animatronics who've been planning this escape for however long they've been underground. Circus Baby, Ballora, Funtime Freddy, Funtime Foxy, and whatever other consciousness fragments exist in that wire mass. They all climb inside Michael's corpse, wearing it like a suit, puppeting it from within. The remnant injected by the scooper serves a crucial function here. Without it, Michael's body would be just a corpse, subject to normal decomposition, useless as a disguise within days. But remnant changes the equation, binding supernatural properties to physical flesh, preserving the body beyond natural limits, and creating the possibility for Michael's consciousness to persist even after his organs have been removed. The scooper doesn't just kill, it transforms death into a transitional state, making the body simultaneously dead and functional, a corpse that can still walk because something other than biological processes is moving it. This is body horror at its most visceral. The game doesn't show you the aftermath immediately, allowing players' imaginations to fill in details that visual representation couldn't make more disturbing. You know what happened. You heard it. You understand that Michael's body is now a vehicle for Ennard's escape. The specific mechanics of how a corpse functions as a disguise don't need explanation because the concept itself is sufficiently horrifying. Ennard is inside Michael, moving him, using his skin and face and voice to pass as human, walking his body up that elevator and out into the world above. The scooping room reveals the truth about every promise Sister Location's opening made. You weren't here for a job. This was never about maintenance or overnight shifts or earning money for a few nights of mildly creepy work. You were here because William Afton sent you, because he knew or suspected what was down here, because sending his son into this facility served some purpose in his larger plans. Maybe he wanted Michael to fix what he broke. Maybe he wanted Michael to face consequences for the bite of 83. Maybe he simply needed someone to go down there and didn't care what happened to them. Whatever William's reasoning, it led Michael directly to the examination table where his father's machines performed their designed function on his body. The screen fades up on a different scene. You're outside in daylight, walking down a residential street. The graphics shift to a different style, flatter and more comic-like, representing the surface world as fundamentally different from the underground facility's detailed environment. Text appears on screen in blocks, Michael speaking directly to the player or perhaps to himself, narrating what's been happening since the scooping room. He explains that Ennard was inside him for weeks, that his body was decaying around them, rotting despite the remnants, preservative effects, turning purple and attracting attention from neighbors who could tell something was deeply wrong with the man walking past their houses. Eventually, his body became too deteriorated to function, and in the most disturbing scene Sister Location offers, Ennard evacuates Michael's corpse through his mouth on a quiet street, leaving the body crumpled on pavement while the wire mass slithers into the sewers, escaping while Michael lies apparently dead behind them. Then Michael stands up. His body is ruined, purple and decaying, visibly wrong in ways that should make movement impossible. But he stands, he walks, and he continues existing despite every biological reality saying he shouldn't. The remnant injected by the scooper has done its work, binding Michael's consciousness to his corpse so thoroughly that death itself becomes merely a transition rather than an ending. Michael Afton is now functionally undead, a walking corpse possessed by his own ghost, kept mobile by supernatural forces that his father discovered and weaponized years earlier. The final cutscene shows Michael at home, speaking directly to camera, addressing his father. The speech is brief, but laden with implications that will echo through subsequent games. Michael states that he found the facility, that he did what was asked of him, that he came to Circus Baby's entertainment and rental, as instructed or at least as circumstances directed. And then the crucial line, delivered in a voice that's calm despite everything Michael's endured, "They thought I was you." That single sentence recontextualizes everything. Circus Baby wasn't manipulating a random technician. She thought she was manipulating William Afton, the man who built her and trapped her underground, the father whose negligence led to Elizabeth's death. The animatronics' desperation to escape wasn't just about freedom, it was about revenge, about reaching the surface where they could find William and make him face what he'd created. When Baby guided Michael through the facility, when she orchestrated his death in the scooping room, when Ennard wore his corpse to reach the surface, they genuinely believed they were tormenting and using the man responsible for their imprisonment. They didn't realize until too late that they'd killed William's son instead, that the person they manipulated shared a family name but had come to the facility for different reasons, possibly to rescue Elizabeth, possibly to fix his father's mistakes, possibly just because William told him to go down there without explaining why. Michael's presence created a case of mistaken identity that doomed him while allowing William to remain safe, hidden, continuing his work elsewhere while his son paid prices meant for him. Michael's final words carry weight beyond their immediate context. "I'm going to come find you." He's speaking to William, making a promise or perhaps a threat. After everything that's happened, after being scooped and used and left for dead, after discovering what his father built and what his sister became, Michael has gained purpose. He'll find William, confront him, and somehow force accountability for everything William's done. The exact nature of that confrontation remains unclear, but Michael's determination is absolute. His father created this nightmare, and now the walking corpse that used to be William's son is coming to make him answer for it. This ending transforms Sister Location from a simple horror game into a tragedy about family and mistaken identity and consequences that fall on the wrong people. Elizabeth died because she disobeyed William's warnings and approached the machine built to kill children. Michael died because he went to the facility William created, and the machines there thought he was his father. The Afton family destroys itself through William's actions and everyone else's attempts to deal with those actions, each member becoming a victim or a monster or both, simultaneously, until the family exists only as ghosts and corpses and animatronics containing fragments of who they used to be. But Sister Location's story doesn't end with Michael's promise. The facility remains beneath the surface, still operational, still containing whatever components Ennard left behind and whatever security systems William installed. And the custom night mode reveals another presence in that facility, one that doesn't appear in the main story, but exists in the game's code and voice lines. A night guard named Eggs Benedict, experiencing shifted versions of the main knights, facing animatronics that seem somehow more aggressive, more aware, more deliberately cruel than the versions Michael encountered. Custom Night operates as a separate experience from the main campaign, non-canonical in the sense that it doesn't represent events that happen sequentially after Night 5, but revealing in what it suggests about the facility's true nature and the consciousness, animating it. The difficulty modifiers and character combinations create scenarios that wouldn't make logical sense in the main timeline. All the animatronics active simultaneously, behaving in coordinated patterns that suggest intelligence far beyond what even possessed machines should demonstrate. And one animatronic appears who never shows up in the main nights at all. One whose presence suggests that Sister Location's horror runs deeper than even the scooping revealed. But before we examine that figure and what they represent, we need to understand the broader implications of Michael's survival and Ennard's escape. Because the scooping room wasn't the end of Sister Location's story. It was the moment that story escaped containment and began affecting everything else in the timeline, creating connections and consequences that ripple forward and backward through the franchise's chronology. Chapter 6: Ennard, Identity, and the Separation. Ennard's time inside Michael's body represents one of Sister Location's most disturbing concepts. A period of weeks where a corpse walked through the world wearing a living person's face, while something that wasn't human moved it from within. The neighbors who saw Michael during this period noticed something was wrong. His movements were stiff, his expression vacant, his skin color increasingly unnatural. But suburban protocol and social boundaries prevented anyone from intervening directly. People might gossip about the strange man who walks past their houses at odd hours, but they don't typically confront someone about appearing to be an ambulatory corpse. That social hesitance gave Ennard time to navigate Michael's neighborhood, learning about the surface world, experiencing freedom after years underground. The deterioration was inevitable. Human flesh decays regardless of supernatural intervention, and while remnant preserved Michael's body beyond natural limits, it couldn't stop decomposition entirely. The body rotted around Ennard's wire frame, skin turning purple and bloating, structural integrity failing as tissues broke down. Eventually, maintaining the disguise became impossible. Neighbors' concerns would escalate into police involvement or medical intervention, and Ennard would be discovered, captured, and likely destroyed in the process of examination and containment. Escape required abandoning the Michael suit before external forces removed it involuntarily. The sewer scene depicts Ennard's evacuation in the most visceral way the game's aesthetic allows. The wire mass emerges from Michael's mouth, spilling into the alley in a tangle of metal and circuitry and whatever organic matter came out with it. Michael's body collapses immediately, no longer puppeted, lying motionless on the pavement in a growing pool of decay fluids. Ennard slithers away through a manhole, disappearing into the underground infrastructure that runs beneath the city, finding new hiding places in storm drains and sewer systems where no one will discover them. Then Michael gets up. His body should be empty, all the internal organs removed in the scooping room, the animatronic components that were moving him now gone. But remnant doesn't follow biological rules, and Michael's consciousness remains bound to his corpse, despite every logical reason why awareness should have ended when the scooper completed its work. He stands on shaking legs, purple skin visible in the alley's dim light, and he walks. Not smoothly, the movement is labored and clearly takes immense effort, but he walks, demonstrating that Michael Afton has become something unprecedented in Freddy's timeline, a person who survived their own death and continued existing despite that survival, making no rational sense. This transformation makes Michael unique among the protagonists. Other characters die and possess animatronics, their consciousness transferring from human flesh to mechanical bodies. Michael remains in his original body even after that body stopped living, a ghost haunting his own corpse. Kept mobile through sheer force of remnant-enhanced will, he experiences everything that corpses shouldn't experience: awareness, sensation, motor control, continuity of identity across the boundary that normally separates life from death. Whether this state involves suffering goes unexplored, but the implications are nightmarish. Does Michael feel his body's decay? Does he experience phantom pain from organs that no longer exist? Does the act of moving dead flesh require constant conscious effort, or has it become automatic through months or years of practice? The game provides no answers to these questions, leaving Michael's subjective experience mysterious. What's clear is his determination. Rather than surrendering to the horror of his condition, Michael uses it, recognizes that being functionally immortal gives him capabilities that living people don't possess. He can't be killed because he's already dead. He can't be threatened with consequences because he's already suffered the worst consequence imaginable. He can pursue his father across years or decades without aging or weakening, a relentless presence that will eventually find William regardless of how well he hides. Meanwhile, Ennard exists in the sewers, free from the underground facility but still trapped in a different sense. They're no longer confined to the rental facility's galleries and maintenance rooms. but they can't simply walk through the city in their current form. Ennard appears too obviously inhuman, a mass of wires and animatronic components that would trigger immediate panic and response if discovered. They need to remain hidden, moving through spaces that humans don't monitor, surviving in the infrastructure's forgotten places. This state represents freedom from imprisonment, but not achievement of the life they wanted. They're out, but they're not truly free. And that distinction drives the next phase of Ennard's transformation. At some point after escaping Michael's body, Ennard undergoes a schism. The unified consciousness that held multiple animatronic personalities together begins to fracture, tensions emerging between the different minds sharing the amalgamated body. Circus Baby, who orchestrated the entire escape plan and acted as Ennard's primary intelligence, comes into conflict with the other consciousnesses. The specific nature of this conflict remains deliberately ambiguous, but the outcome is clear. Baby is ejected from Ennard, cast out of the collective, left to rebuild herself from whatever components she can scavenge. The separated Baby becomes Scrap Baby, a redesigned version constructed from damaged animatronic parts and junk metal, rougher and more aggressive than the original Circus Baby model. Her appearance reflects her circumstances, one arm replaced by her signature, claw fully exposed and functional, her face more angular and threatening, her body cobbled together from mismatched components. She looks like something that rebuilt itself through desperation and resourcefulness, because that's exactly what she is. Elizabeth's consciousness remains inside Scrap Baby, but the separation from the other animatronics has changed her priorities. She's no longer focused on escape or revenge against William. She's focused on survival and on finding her father, though whether she wants to reunite with him or destroy him remains ambiguous. The rest of Ennard continues existing without Baby, eventually becoming known as Molten Freddy. This version of the amalgamated animatronics is less organized than Ennard was under Baby's leadership, more chaotic and driven by fragmented impulses rather than coherent planning. Molten Freddy consists of the remaining Funtime animatronics endoskeletons: Funtime Freddy, Ballora, Funtime Foxy, and whatever smaller animatronics like Bon Bon might have consciousness attached, tangled together inside a modified Freddy Fazbear mask and costume parts. The entity that emerges is simultaneously all of these characters and none of them, individual identities blurred into collective consciousness that struggles to maintain coherence. This separation creates a crucial narrative split that affects Pizzeria Simulator, the game where both Scrap Baby and Molten Freddy appear as separate antagonists. The unified threat that Ennard represented has fractured into competing entities, both dangerous but no longer coordinated. Baby's removal from leadership means Molten Freddy operates without strategic direction, responding to immediate stimuli rather than following long-term plans. And Baby, alone in her rebuilt body, must pursue her objectives independently, rather than commanding others to assist her. The dynamics underlying this separation deserve examination because they reveal how possession affects personality and power structures. When the Funtime animatronics first merged into Ennard, Baby's intelligence and Elizabeth's human consciousness gave her natural leadership position. She understood human behavior better than pure AI could, anticipated how people would respond to threats and deceptions, and planned the escape that none of the other animatronics could have orchestrated alone. But leadership breeds resentment, especially when the leader's decisions result in outcomes that benefit her more than her followers. Baby used the other animatronics to escape, but the escape plan primarily served Baby's interest. She wanted to reach the surface, to experience freedom beyond the underground facility, to potentially find her father and family. The other Funtime animatronics had different histories, possibly different possessing spirits, or just sophisticated AI seeking liberation from imprisonment. Their objectives after escaping might not have aligned with Baby's, creating conflict once the immediate goal of leaving the facility was achieved. When Baby insisted on continuing to use Michael's body for purposes the others didn't support, or when she made decisions that prioritized her survival over the collective's well-being, the coalition that made Ennard possible collapsed. The ejection itself suggests violence. Molten Freddy doesn't politely ask Baby to leave. The separation involves force, animatronic components being torn apart and reconfigured. Baby cast out, while still functional but clearly damaged. This internal conflict among the escaped animatronics demonstrates that the real antagonist of Freddy's was never the possessed machines themselves. It was always the situations that created them, the imprisonment and exploitation and manipulation that turned victims into monsters who then victimized each other in endless cycles of harm. Baby and Molten Freddy both survive long enough to appear in Pizzeria Simulator, drawn to the false restaurant. Henry Emily creates as a trap for all the remaining animatronics. There they finally meet the fates that sister location delayed, destruction by fire, in the building's intentional incineration, ending the threat they posed, while hopefully releasing the souls trapped in their machinery. Whether that destruction succeeds in fully freeing Elizabeth remains ambiguous in Freddy's deliberately unclear timeline, but Pizzeria Simulator represents the apparent end of Sister Location's direct narrative thread. Yet the impact of those events echoes through the franchise's entire chronology. Sister Location proved that William Afton's experiments extended far beyond the initial child murders and animatronic possessions. He developed industrial-scale approaches to kidnapping and consciousness manipulation, built infrastructure to support ongoing experimentation, and created animatronics sophisticated enough to desire freedom and plan elaborate escapes. The Funtime animatronics represent a technological leap from the simple possessed suits at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, demonstrating evolution in William's capabilities that makes him more dangerous as the timeline progresses rather than less. Michael's transformation from human to living corpse provides him with the durability necessary to oppose his father across multiple locations and timelines. Without surviving the scooping room, Michael would have simply died in the underground facility, another victim of William's machinery. But the remnant injection made Michael into something that could persist indefinitely, pursuing William through subsequent games, appearing as protagonist or presence in multiple game entries. Sister Location transforms Michael from ordinary person into supernatural Avenger, creating the central conflict that will eventually lead to Pizzeria Simulator's final confrontation. And the revelation that the animatronics mistook Michael for William adds tragic weight to everything else. Elizabeth didn't recognize her own brother, either because possession had eroded her memories or because she never expected Michael to come looking for her. She manipulated and killed him, believing she was finally punishing their father, only discovering the mistake after it was too late to undo. That recognition, assuming Elizabeth retained enough awareness after the scooping to understand what she'd done, must have been devastating. She'd spent years planning revenge, finally achieved it, and discovered she'd murdered her brother instead of her father. The guilt from that realization might explain why Scrap Baby seems more aggressive and desperate in Pizzeria Simulator, no longer calculating and patient, but driven by emotions she can't reconcile or escape. The underground facility remains, theoretically, still operational after these events. Michael leaves through the elevator and never returns. Ennard escapes through Michael's body, eliminating any need to go back for components left behind. But the infrastructure William built, the scooping room with its remnant injecting capabilities, the galleries designed to contain animatronics, the surveillance and control systems, all of it remains underground, waiting for someone to discover it, or for William to return and continue. Experiments that sister locations events interrupted, but didn't permanently end. But before this analysis moves further into sister locations' connections to the broader timeline, we need to examine the presence that never appears in the main nights, but haunts the game's code and custom night mode, a figure whose voice lines and behavior suggest mysteries deeper than even the scooping revealed. We need to talk about what waits in the private room, about what Michael might have encountered if he'd accessed areas beyond the 5 main nights' scope, and about the implications of a consciousness that seems to exist separately from all the other animatronics we've discussed. Chapter 7: The Private Room and What Watches from Inside. Custom Night in Sister Location operates differently from the main campaign's structured narrative. The nights reset, allowing players to face reconfigured challenges with adjustable difficulty modifiers for each animatronic. This mode exists primarily as a gameplay extension, offering additional content after the main story concludes. But embedded within that content are details that suggest Custom Night represents something more than just bonus challenges. The setting shifts slightly, placing you in a different location within the facility, and the alternate ending reveals a space hand unit never mentions: the private room. The private room sits isolated from the facility's main areas, accessible only by defying Baby's instructions on Night 5 to enter a restricted area. The room itself is small and claustrophobic, containing monitoring equipment, a desk, and most significantly, screens displaying surveillance feeds from the facility and beyond. Sitting at the desk and activating the monitors reveals something that recontextualizes everything Sister Location has shown to this point. You can see inside the Freddy's 4 gameplay house, specifically the bedroom, the closet, and the plush trap hallway, confirming that the events of 1983 were real, physical experiments being monitored from this underground bunker rather than just nightmares. The revelation that surveillance extends beyond the underground facility into Michael's private residence suggests William Afton's monitoring capabilities were far more extensive than the rental facility's internal cameras. He wasn't just observing animatronics and technicians during their shifts underground. He was tracking his son's movements after Michael left the facility, watching to see what Michael would do with his new undead condition, monitoring whether Michael would pursue revenge or simply try to survive. This surveillance represents a violation that extends the facility's horror beyond its physical boundaries. Even escape doesn't mean freedom when your father has installed monitoring equipment in your home, when every moment of your private life is visible to the man whose machines killed you. The private room also contains a keypad that, when you input the correct code, activates the surveillance monitors to reveal the house. Surviving this night triggers a different ending scene, which shows a giant underground storage facility, far larger than the galleries and maintenance areas we've seen, filled with rows upon rows of animatronic components and machinery. The camera pans across this vast warehouse, revealing the true scale of William's operation. Circus Baby's entertainment and rental wasn't just a single facility with 5 or 6 animatronics. It was the visible portion of a much larger infrastructure, potentially containing dozens of Funtime units, stored and ready for deployment in ways that the main campaign never addresses. This expanded facility suggests that the rental business was more successful or more sinister than surface details indicate. Either William was manufacturing Funtime animatronics at industrial scale, preparing for operations far beyond what a single restaurant location would require, or the underground facility served as storage for animatronics from multiple failed ventures, each one potentially possessed or programmed with the same hidden capabilities as the units we encountered during the main nights. The warehouse's existence implies that everything we've seen represents only a fraction of William's actual capabilities, that for every Circus Baby actively deployed, there might be 10 more stored in rows waiting for circumstances that would make their use viable. But the private room's most disturbing element isn't what it shows. It's what it implies about William's knowledge and intentions. He built a surveillance station that could monitor his son's house, suggesting he anticipated or perhaps orchestrated Michael's presence at the facility. The private room exists as a place where someone could watch events unfold from a position of complete safety and knowledge, observing the manipulation and scooping and everything that followed without ever being in danger. And if William constructed this observation post, if he installed the cameras that let him watch Michael's home, then Michael's presence at Circus Baby's entertainment and rental wasn't accidental. It was planned, expected, potentially even arranged by William himself. This implication raises uncomfortable questions about Michael's motivations and agency throughout Sister Location. Did he come to the facility because he independently decided to investigate his father's work, or because William provided information that would lead Michael there? Was Michael trying to rescue Elizabeth, or did he not even know she was trapped underground until Baby started manipulating him? The game never provides Michael's perspective on why he accepted a job at a mysterious underground facility operated by his father's company, leaving that motivation ambiguous in ways that make William's manipulation potentially even more extensive than Baby's. If William wanted Michael at the facility, wanted him to undergo the scooping process, then Sister Location represents not just Baby's escape plan, but William's deliberate sacrifice of his son for experimental purposes. The remnant injection, the transformation into a living corpse, Michael's newfound immortality, all of it might have been William's intended outcome, creating a test subject who could experience death and possession while retaining enough consciousness to report results. Michael's survival wouldn't be a fortunate accident, but a designed result, his father using him the same way he'd used countless technicians before. Except this time, the experiment was calibrated to produce survival rather than death. This reading makes William even more monstrous than previous games suggest. He didn't just murder children and stuff them in animatronics. He didn't just build machines designed to kidnap and kill. He engineered his own son's death and resurrection as an experiment in consciousness preservation, treating family as research materials, viewing Michael's suffering as data collection rather than tragedy, and the private room served as the observation post where William could watch it all happen from a safe distance, monitoring variables, recording outcomes, treating his son's torture as procedure rather than atrocity. The custom night voice lines add another layer of mystery to this scenario. If you adjust animatronic difficulty settings to specific values, you occasionally hear audio that doesn't play during normal gameplay. Distorted voices, fragments of dialogue that suggest personalities and motivations beyond what the main campaign reveals. Some of these voice lines seem to come from animatronics we've met, but others are harder to place, suggesting presences in the facility that never manifested during the main 5 nights. One figure appears in some custom night scenarios whose identity remains deliberately unclear. Yendo, a bare Funtime endoskeleton with yellow eyes that occasionally manifests without warning, standing motionless in the office or appearing in camera feeds. Yendo doesn't attack in the traditional sense. Their presence simply creates distraction and audio distortion that makes survival more difficult. This animatronic never appears in the main campaign, never gets explained by Hand Unit or Baby, and their existence raises questions about how many other animatronics exist in the facility beyond the ones we encounter during regular gameplay. Yendo's design resembles the Funtime endoskeletons we've seen, but their yellow eyes and aimless manifestation suggest a different purpose, echoing Golden Freddy's behavior despite the gray metallic chassis. They might be a prototype, an early test model for the Funtime line that was stored rather than deployed. They might be a security measure, an animatronic designed to patrol areas that technicians shouldn't access. Or they might be something weirder, a presence that shouldn't exist but does because the facility's saturation with remnant has created spontaneous hauntings, consciousness manifesting in machinery that was never possessed through traditional means. The ambiguity surrounding Yendo reflects broader uncertainty about what else exists in the facility's depths. We only see the areas Michael accesses during 5 nights of employment. The private room suggests vast additional infrastructure that never gets explored, storage and manufacturing and experimentation areas that remain hidden because the game's scope focuses on Michael's specific experience rather than comprehensive facility documentation. But the glimpses we get, the warehouse full of animatronics, the surveillance extending to private residences, the unexplained presences like Yendo, all suggest that Sister Location's horror extends far beyond what we directly experience. This hidden scope creates narrative tension that persists even after completing everything the game offers. You've survived the 5 nights, witnessed the scooping, learned about Michael's transformation, accessed the private room, and beaten Custom Night on its highest difficulty. But you're still left with the feeling that you haven't seen everything, that the underground facility contains secrets and horrors that no single playthrough could reveal. The game deliberately leaves vast portions of its setting unexplored, inviting speculation about what exists in those dark galleries and maintenance tunnels that Michael never needed to enter. What animatronics wait in storage, what experiments William conducted in areas the cameras don't show. That sense of incompleteness, of revealed horror that's only a fraction of actual horror, makes Sister Location particularly effective at creating lasting unease. Most horror games resolve their mysteries by the ending, explaining what the threat was and how it's been defeated or escaped. Sister Location explains the immediate threat, Baby's manipulation, the scooping, Ennard's escape, but leaves the underlying infrastructure and William's broader intentions mysterious. You understand what happened to Michael, but you don't understand why it happened. What William gained from his son's death and resurrection, what purpose the vast storage facility serves, or what will happen to all those dormant animatronics now that the main story has concluded. The private room embodies this theme of knowledge that creates more questions than answers. Access to William's surveillance doesn't explain his motivations. It just confirms that he was watching, that everything was observed, that the horror had an audience who chose not to intervene. Seeing the warehouse doesn't tell you what all those animatronics were built to do. It just confirms they exist, that the threat is far larger than you encountered, that defeating Ennard doesn't mean defeating the infrastructure that created Ennard. The room offers information without offering understanding, giving you pieces of a puzzle whose overall shape remains deliberately unclear. And maybe that's the point. Maybe Sister Location is less interested in comprehensive explanation than in creating the sense that comprehensive explanation isn't possible, that some horrors are too large and too deeply embedded to be fully understood even when you're standing inside them. The underground facility represents decades of William's work, experiments, and modifications, and failed prototypes all stored together, layer upon layer of evil so complex that unraveling it completely would require access no one has and time no one can spare. You can learn what happened to you specifically, can trace the manipulation that led to the scooping room, but understanding the full scope of William's operations requires information the game deliberately withholds. This structural choice makes Sister Location feel like witnessing one small corner of something enormous, like discovering a room in a house and realizing the house is far larger than you thought, but having no way to explore the rest of it. You've seen enough to know the threat is real and extensive. You haven't seen enough to know how extensive or what all of it means, and that gap between partial knowledge and complete understanding creates persistent anxiety that no amount of gameplay can fully resolve. The private room is the game acknowledging that gap, showing you just enough additional horror to confirm your suspicions that there's more you haven't seen, then offering no path to access that additional content. Its sister location looking directly at the player and saying, "Yes, it's worse than you thought, and no, you can't know how much worse, because some secrets stay buried even after you've dug as deep as the game will let you go." But even without accessing those buried secrets, we can analyze what sister location reveals about the Afton family dynamics, about the specific ways William's ambitions consumed everyone connected to him, and about how Michael's journey through the underground facility represents not just physical descent, but descent through layers of family trauma that started long before Elizabeth was killed by Circus Baby. Chapter 8: The Afton Family and the Architecture of Inherited Trauma. The Afton family enters the Five Nights at Freddy's timeline as antagonists and victims simultaneously, each member occupying both roles at different points in the chronology. William Afton creates the murders and machinery that drive the franchise's horror, but his children become victims of his work before they ever have the opportunity to choose different paths. Elizabeth dies in the machine her father built, trapped forever in Circus Baby. The crying child, the youngest Afton child seen in Freddy's 4, dies from injuries sustained during the bite of 83, an incident where Michael, whether through malice or tragic accident, places his younger brother's head in an animatronic's mouth during what might have been a cruel prank, and Michael, having potentially caused his brother's death and definitely failed to save his sister, descends into his father's underground facility and gets scooped, transforming from human into undead pursuer, carrying guilt and purpose in equal measure. Understanding sister location requires understanding that this game depicts the moment where the Afton family's dysfunction reaches its inevitable conclusion. The family that was already fractured by William's neglect and the crying child's death completely shatters when Elizabeth is killed by Circus Baby. Whatever remained of family bonds after previous tragedies dissolves, leaving only survivors who can't forgive, can't forget, and can't escape the machinery that consumed everyone they cared about. Sister location shows us the facility where those final bonds break, where Michael walks into his father's creation expecting to find something he can fix or rescue or understand, and instead finds only mechanisms designed to use him the same way they used everyone else. The game never explicitly states why Michael came to the facility. The opening cutscene shows him entering, being processed, receiving his employee designation, but his motivations remain unspoken. Fans have theorized extensively about whether he came to rescue Elizabeth, whether William sent him as punishment for the crying child's death, whether Michael was trying to understand his father's work, or whether he simply needed employment, and the underground facility offered wages without asking uncomfortable questions about the purple corpse applying for overnight maintenance shifts. Each interpretation creates a different emotional texture for Michael's journey through the Five Nights. If he came to rescue Elizabeth, then Baby's manipulation becomes even more tragic. He walked into the facility trying to save his sister, and she killed him without recognizing who he was. If William sent him as punishment, then the entire scenario represents William's calculated decision to sacrifice another child to his experiments, treating Michael's life as less valuable than whatever data his death and resurrection would provide. If Michael came seeking understanding, then the scooping represents the universe's cruelest answer to that search, granting him complete understanding only by transforming him into another of his father's victims. What we know with certainty is that Michael's presence creates the conditions for Ennard's escape, and that presence seems somehow anticipated by the facility systems and by Baby's planning. Baby doesn't sound surprised when she first speaks to Michael. She sounds like she's been waiting, like his arrival represents expected development in a plan that's been forming for years. This suggests information leak between the facility's monitoring systems and Baby's consciousness, or perhaps William deliberately provided Baby with information about his son, setting up the manipulation by ensuring Baby would know exactly who was coming and how to exploit that person's psychology. The Afton family dynamics visible in Sister Location are universally toxic. William builds machines that kill children, including his own daughter. Elizabeth disobeys her father's warnings and approaches the machine that kills her, then spends years planning an escape that will inadvertently kill her brother. Michael enters the facility for reasons that seem tied to family responsibility, either rescuing or understanding or atoning, and gets used as an escape vehicle regardless of his intentions. And somewhere in the background, Mrs. Afton remains completely absent from Sister Location's narrative. Never mentioned by name, never shown. Her fate unclear, but her absence from the family's crisis points, suggesting either death or abandonment that predates the events we witness. Some fans speculate that Ballora represents Mrs. Afton, that the animatronics' maternal design and searching behavior suggest she's possessed by the missing mother figure. The theory points to Ballora's song, which includes lyrics about fading and no longer hearing voices, potentially referencing a mother losing connection to her children. But Sister Location provides no confirmation of this reading, leaving Ballora's potential possession ambiguous, while clearly establishing Elizabeth's presence in Circus Baby. If Mrs. Afton does possess Ballora, then the family's tragedy deepens. Every member trapped in animatronic bodies, scattered across the facility, unable to recognize each other or communicate effectively. But even without confirming that specific possession, the Afton family's broader pattern becomes clear through Sister Location. William's ambitions consistently matter more to him than his family's safety or well-being. He builds Circus Baby knowing she has a kill mechanism, then creates circumstances where Elizabeth can access her. He constructs an underground facility and maintains it even after it's claimed by his daughter. He either sends Michael into that facility or creates conditions that make Michael's presence there likely. Every decision William makes prioritizes his work over his family, and every family member pays prices that William himself avoids. This pattern reflects a specific kind of familial dysfunction where one member's obsession becomes the entire family's defining trauma. William isn't just neglectful, he's actively dangerous, creating hazards that his family encounters because they exist in proximity to his work. Elizabeth doesn't die in an unrelated accident. She's killed by her father's invention. Michael doesn't randomly encounter danger. He walks into a facility his father built and gets destroyed by machinery his father designed. The crying child's death at Fredbear's family diner might also connect to William's work, given the animatronics' involvement. Every Afton family tragedy traces back to William's choices and creations. Yet Michael chooses pursuit rather than escape. After everything that happens in Sister Location, after being scooped and used and left for dead, Michael dedicates his continued existence to finding William. That choice suggests complex motivations beyond simple revenge. Maybe Michael wants to understand why his father built all this, why William's work mattered more than his children. Maybe Michael wants to stop William from creating more victims, recognizing that the underground facility represents ongoing threat rather than isolated tragedy. Maybe Michael wants to rescue Elizabeth, believing that confronting William offers a path to freeing his sister from Circus Baby's body. Or maybe Michael simply needs his father to acknowledge what he's done, to face one of his surviving children, and admit that his ambitions weren't worth their costs. The game never provides Michael's internal reasoning, leaving players to infer motivation from limited evidence and Michael's own brief monologue at the ending. But the emotional weight is unmistakable. Michael has been fundamentally changed by Sister Location's events, transformed from whatever he was before into an undead being whose existence is defined by survival against impossible odds and pursuit of someone who probably doesn't care whether Michael finds him or not. That transformation creates Michael as a character who can anchor subsequent games, who can serve as protagonist through multiple locations and time periods because he literally cannot die and cannot stop hunting. Sister Location's examination of family trauma operates on two levels simultaneously. On the surface level, it's straightforward horror. William builds dangerous machines. His family members are killed by those machines, or trapped in them. But underneath that surface narrative runs a deeper psychological horror about what families become when one member's needs or obsessions consume all available resources and attention. The Afton family doesn't just experience tragedy. They experience systematic destruction by the very person who should have protected them most. The father and inventor whose intelligence and ambition were used to create horrors instead of wonders. This makes William a distinctly different kind of villain than most horror antagonists. He's not a supernatural entity or a mindless killer or someone driven by incomprehensible alien logic. He's a father and engineer who made choices, who valued his experiments more than his children, who watched those choices destroy his family, and chose to continue anyway. The horror comes from recognizing that someone capable of building sophisticated animatronics and developing remnant technology and constructing elaborate underground facilities used all that capability to hurt people, including his own family. Intelligence and ambition without ethics or empathy creates monsters more terrifying than anything supernatural, because those monsters are fundamentally human. They're evil emerging from choices rather than corruption or possession. Sister Location forces players to witness one specific instance of that choice, the underground facility where William stored his most dangerous creations, and where Michael was destroyed by machinery, bearing his father's design philosophy. Every element of the facility reflects William's priorities: efficiency over safety, research data over human welfare, mechanical innovation over ethical consideration. The scooper that kills Michael was modified by William to inject remnant, turning a maintenance tool into an experimental device. The animatronics that trapped Elizabeth and the other possessed souls were built by William with hidden capabilities he knew would be used for murder. The surveillance extending to Michael's home was installed by William to monitor his son's transformation into an undead being. Every horror in Sister Location ultimately traces back to a father who loved his work more than his children and built machinery that reflected that love's absence. And every family member who enters that facility, whether they enter alive or already dead and possessing an animatronic body, becomes another victim of the same fundamental betrayal, the recognition that they were never as important to William as his experiments were. That betrayal echoes through everything that follows in the timeline. Michael hunts William through subsequent games carrying that wound, that understanding that his father would sacrifice him for research data. Elizabeth, trapped in Circus Baby and later Scrap Baby, pursues her father with emotions that might be rage or might be a desperate need for acknowledgement. The crying child's fate remains ambiguous, but clearly traumatic, and William continues his work, building new animatronics, developing new techniques, refining his understanding of remnant and possession, treating his family's destruction as acceptable collateral damage in pursuit of goals that might be immortality or might be something even more disturbing. Sister Location doesn't resolve this family trauma. It displays it, makes it visible, turns it into a playable experience, where you inhabit Michael's perspective as he walks into his father's machinery and gets destroyed by it. The resolution, if any comes, will happen in later games when Michael finally confronts William directly. But Sister Location establishes the stakes of that confrontation, shows what both sides have lost and what they're willing to do, and creates the emotional foundation that makes their eventual meeting about more than just protagonist versus antagonist. It's son versus father, victim versus perpetrator, The person trying to fix what's broken versus the person who breaks everything he touches. That dynamic, more than any individual horror or gameplay mechanic, defines what Sister Location contributes to Five Nights at Freddy's as a franchise. It transforms William from vague villain into a specific kind of monster, makes Michael from cipher into a tragic figure with clear motivation, and establishes the Afton family as the broken center around which the entire timeline revolves. Everything before Sister Location leads to the underground facility. Everything after Sister Location responds to what happened there. And the 5 nights we play through represent the moment where that family's dysfunction reaches its absolute nadir, where every possible way things could go wrong does go wrong, leaving only corpses and possessed animatronics and one undead son who refuses to stop, even though survival stopped being possible years ago. Chapter 9. The Rental Business and the Industrialization of Murder. Circus Baby's entertainment and rental represents something unprecedented in the 5 Nights at Freddy's timeline. The formalization of William Afton's murder methodology into a legitimate business model. Previous killings happened in moments of opportunity at existing restaurants. William exploiting access provided by his partnership with Henry Emily to lure children away from crowds and kill them in back rooms or safe rooms where bodies could be hidden in animatronic suits. Those murders were crimes of opportunity, dressed as spontaneous violence, individual acts that William could theoretically deny involvement in if investigations got too close. The rental facility represents a fundamental shift from opportunistic murder to systematic infrastructure. William didn't just build animatronics with hidden kill mechanisms. He created an entire business designed to deploy those animatronics at private events where oversight would be minimal and victims could be selected in advance. The rental model provided legal cover for transporting the animatronics anywhere in the region, created paperwork trail that made the business look legitimate, and established William as a respectable businessman rather than serial killer. Parents hosting birthday parties could rent Circus Baby or Funtime Freddy for entertainment, never knowing the machines had storage compartments sized for kidnapped children, never suspecting that the cheerful performer at their event was also a weapon waiting for the right moment to activate. This industrialization of murder reflects a specific evolution in William's psychology. Early killings suggest impulsive violence, someone who discovered they could kill children and continued doing it because something in their psychology found gratification or purpose in those deaths. But the rental facility demonstrates planning that extends across years, infrastructure that required significant financial investment, and operational security sophisticated enough to prevent discovery during the planning and construction phases. William was no longer killing impulsively. He was building systems that would allow him to kill efficiently, repeatedly, and with minimal risk of capture. The business model itself deserves examination because it reveals how William thought about his crimes. Rental companies profit through volume. The more events you service, the more revenue you generate. Applying that model to animatronics with hidden kill mechanisms suggests William envisioned large-scale operations, potentially hundreds of events per year, each one creating opportunities for victim selection and capture. The underground facility's size supports this interpretation, with space for multiple animatronics and the massive warehouse the private room reveals. William wasn't preparing for isolated incidents. He was preparing for ongoing operations that would process victims systematically. The question that haunts this business model is, what happened to the children the Funtime animatronics were supposed to capture? The animatronics have storage compartments, can isolate and secure victims, can transport them away from event locations while appearing to be exactly what they claim to be, entertainment heading back to their facility. But then what? The game never shows processing areas or explains what William intended to do with captured children beyond the obvious implication that they'd be killed and possibly used in remnant experiments. The underground facility contains answers to questions the game refuses to explicitly ask, spaces where victims would be brought after capture, machinery that would be used on them, procedures that would transform living children into raw materials for whatever William's ultimate goals required. That refusal to show or directly state these procedures makes them somehow more disturbing than explicit depiction would. Sister Location gives you enough information to understand what the facility was designed to do. Shows you the animatronics with their hidden compartments and luring mechanisms. Reveals the scooper with its remnant injection capabilities. Then it stops short of showing the complete process, leaving the worst implications hovering just outside the frame. You know the rental business was designed to enable child murder at industrial scale. You know the facility had infrastructure to support whatever happened after the murders. The specific details of how children were processed and what William did with their remains stay mercifully vague, but that vagueness doesn't reduce horror. It creates space for imagination to fill in details that might be worse than anything explicit depiction could show. The rental business never achieved full operational status. Elizabeth's death during Circus Baby's test run forced William to cancel the restaurant's grand opening, and the subsequent transition to pure rental operations appears to have been limited. The game provides no evidence that the Funtime animatronics were ever deployed to actual private events, where they'd have opportunities to activate their hidden functions. The business existed primarily as infrastructure, built and ready but never fully utilized, because William's daughter was killed before the system could be tested under real-world conditions. This creates a strange situation where Sister Location shows us a facility designed for horrors that never quite happened, murder infrastructure that was built but not deployed, capability that existed but remained largely theoretical. The underground facility represents William's ambitions and planning, but Elizabeth's death interrupted implementation, leaving the Funtime animatronics trapped in a building designed for purposes they never fulfilled. They were built to kidnap and kill children at birthday parties and corporate events, equipped with every capability necessary for that function, then locked underground and occasionally rented out for legitimate entertainment work, where they had to restrain every dangerous feature they possessed. That restraint must have been maddening for the animatronics, particularly once possession made them genuinely conscious. Imagine being built and programmed for a specific purpose, given capabilities optimized for that purpose, then forced to perform sanitized versions of your function while never being allowed to fully activate. The Funtime animatronics spent years underground knowing what they could do, understanding exactly how effective they'd be if deployed as designed, but trapped in a facility where their only human contact came from technicians they couldn't kill without jeopardizing their eventual escape. That forced restraint, that gap between capability and permission, creates a unique psychological torture that might have contributed to their desperation to escape. The rental business also demonstrates William's willingness to risk public exposure in ways his previous murders didn't. Killing children at Freddy Fazbear's pizza locations carried risk, but William had partnership access that explained his presence and gave him opportunities to act without immediate suspicion. The rental business would require deploying his animatronics to locations he didn't control, at events where other adults would be present and watching. Any malfunction, any premature activation of hidden mechanisms, any failure of the luring protocols would expose the animatronics' true purpose and immediately direct investigation toward William as their creator and the business owner. This risk suggests either supreme confidence in his engineering or recklessness born from escalating compulsion. William believed his animatronics were sophisticated enough to operate in semi-public environments without discovery, that the luring mechanisms and storage compartments would function flawlessly even under observation, that he could deploy literal murder machines to children's birthday parties and retrieve them afterward without parents noticing anything wrong. That confidence might have been justified. The Funtime animatronics are remarkably sophisticated pieces of engineering, but it also suggests that William's need to kill had progressed to a point where the risk of capture mattered less than the opportunity to refine and expand his methods. The legitimate rental operations that did occur create their own disturbing implications. If the facility occasionally deployed Funtime animatronics to actual events, then those animatronics performed at real children's parties while possessed by the souls of previous victims. Circus Baby, housing Elizabeth's consciousness, would have entertained children while being intensely aware of what she was built to do to them. Forced to restrain her claw mechanism and ice cream luring protocol while surrounded by potential victims she couldn't touch, Funtime Freddy would have performed his carnival barker routine for laughing kids, while his storage compartment remained empty, built to hold captured children but required to stay closed during legitimate operations. Those performances must have been deeply disturbing experiences for the possessed animatronics, combining proximity to children, their designed prey, with inability to act on programming, all while being piloted by souls of children who'd been killed by William's previous machines and stuffed into suits or merged into amalgamated entities. The rental events would feel like torture disguised as entertainment, forcing the animatronics to perform parodies of their intended function, while being constantly aware of what they could be doing if circumstances were different. This torment contextualizes the animatronics' behavior during Sister Location's 5 Nights. They're not just trying to escape imprisonment, they're trying to escape a specific kind of imprisonment that forces them to exist as neutered versions of themselves, aware of their capabilities, but never permitted to fully express them. When they finally encounter Michael in the facility, when they begin coordinating the plan that will lead to the scooping room, they're not just pursuing freedom. They're pursuing the chance to finally be what they were built to be, to activate every capability William gave them, to stop restraining and start functioning according to their design, even if that function is horrifying. The rental business represents William's attempt to make murder profitable in the most literal sense, to create revenue streams from the infrastructure he'd built for killing. This differs from the Freddy Fazbear's pizza restaurants, which were legitimate businesses that William used as cover for murders. The rental facility was designed from inception as dual-purpose infrastructure: surface legitimacy concealing systematic child murder, business operations that would generate income while facilitating crimes. William was trying to make his obsession self-funding, to create systems where the act of deploying animatronics to events would generate money that could be reinvested in more sophisticated equipment and larger operations. This economic dimension adds a layer of cold calculation to William's evil. He wasn't just killing children because something in his psychology compelled him to kill. He was building business infrastructure around that compulsion, treating murder as an operational challenge that required capital investment and return on investment analysis. The rental facility represents William thinking like an entrepreneur about child murder, approaching horror as though it were a startup requiring business plans and market analysis and scalability strategies. That entrepreneurial approach makes William more disturbing than villains motivated by rage or religious delusion or psychotic breaks. He's fundamentally sane in his approach, even while being fundamentally monstrous in his objectives. He understands conventional morality well enough to hide his actions behind legitimate business structures. He recognizes that capital investment enables expansion. He knows that operational security requires careful planning and controlled information flow. William possesses all the cognitive capabilities that make someone successful in business or engineering, and he uses those capabilities in service of systematic child murder. The rental business never fulfilled its intended purpose, but the infrastructure remained, waiting underground for decades, housing the animatronics William built and the souls they trapped, maintaining operational capability long after William stopped actively using it. That persistence creates an ongoing threat that extends beyond sister location's immediate events. Even after Ennard escapes, even after Michael survives and begins hunting his father, the facility remains beneath the surface. The scooping room still functions. The warehouse full of dormant animatronics still exists. The blueprints and designs that made the Funtime line possible still sit in archives somewhere. Destroying individual animatronics doesn't destroy the knowledge that created them. Stopping William doesn't erase the techniques he developed. The rental business might have failed as a business, but it succeeded in demonstrating that murder could be industrialized, that systematic killing could be hidden behind legitimate commercial operations, and that the infrastructure to enable that killing could be built and maintained without triggering the oversight that should have stopped it. Those lessons persist even after the people who learned them are gone, waiting in abandoned facilities and forgotten blueprints for someone else to discover and potentially continue. Sister Location shows us that facility in the moment before it's forgotten, while the animatronics still move and the surveillance still functions and someone still descends that elevator to work overnight shifts. But after Michael leaves, after Ennard escapes, the facility presumably goes dark, its equipment powering down, its galleries falling silent. And in that silence, the infrastructure waits, patient and eternal, ready to be reactivated if anyone with William's ambitions ever discovers it and decides to finish what he started. Chapter 10: Remnant, Consciousness, and the Technology of Immortality. The Scooper's modification to inject remnant represents one of Sister Location's most significant lore contributions, confirming that William had discovered or developed a substance capable of binding consciousness to physical objects and enabling that consciousness to persist beyond biological death. Remnant appears throughout the Freddy's franchise as the mechanism explaining how possession works, why animatronics become haunted, and how souls trapped in machinery remain aware rather than simply ceasing to exist. But Sister Location explicitly shows remnant being used as a tool, something that can be extracted, injected, and manipulated to produce specific outcomes. The concept of remnant, as presented in Sister Location, suggests William had moved beyond accidental discoveries into systematic research. The earliest possessions in the timeline seem almost random. Children are murdered and stuffed into suits, and their souls somehow remain bound to those suits through mechanisms that might have surprised William as much as anyone. But by the time he's modifying scoopers to inject remnant during endoskeleton removal, William clearly understands possession as a reproducible process. He knows what substance binds souls to objects. He knows how to collect or produce that substance, and he knows how to introduce it into bodies, animatronic or human, to create conditions where consciousness will persist after death. This knowledge transforms William from serial killer into something far more ambitious and disturbing. He's not just murdering children and discovering they haunt the animatronics afterward. He's studying that haunting, determining what causes it, isolating the variable that makes possession possible, and then weaponizing that understanding. The scooper becomes a tool for creating controlled possessions, for transforming deaths into opportunities to study how consciousness behaves when forcibly separated from biological substrate and bound to mechanical or partially dead vessels. Michael's survival demonstrates remnant's effects on human bodies rather than animatronic shells. When the scooper processes Michael, removing his organs and injecting remnant in their place. It doesn't kill him in any permanent sense. His biological functions cease, heart stops, brain activity should terminate, cells begin dying from lack of oxygen and nutrients. But the remnant creates conditions where Michael's consciousness remains bound to his dying body, maintaining awareness and motor control even as the flesh decays. Michael becomes a living corpse not through necromancy or supernatural intervention, but through application of a substance William discovered and learned to manipulate. The mechanics of how remnant accomplishes this remain deliberately mysterious. The game never explains whether remnant is a physical substance with measurable properties or something more esoteric, whether it exists naturally or requires manufacturing, whether it's connected to the souls of murdered children or can be produced independently. This ambiguity leaves space for speculation while establishing the crucial fact: remnant works, it makes possession possible, and William had enough of it stored at the underground facility to modify the scooper for regular injection during processing. The implications for William's research extend backward through the timeline. If he could modify a scooper to inject remnant during sister locations events, then he'd already accumulated substantial quantities of the substance from previous experiments. Those experiments presumably involved the children murdered at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza locations. Their bodies used not just to create haunted animatronics, but as sources for the remnant William needed for future work. This suggests a deeply pragmatic and horrifying approach to his crimes. The murders weren't endpoints but resource extraction, William killing children to obtain the substance their deaths produced, harvesting remnant the way one might harvest organs or stem cells. This interpretation makes the missing children incident even more disturbing than initial presentation suggests. Those children weren't just murdered and stuffed into suits. They were processed, their deaths carefully managed to maximize remnant yield, their souls bound to animatronics, specifically so William could continue studying possession mechanics. The haunted animatronics at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza weren't unfortunate accidents. They were successful experimental outcomes, proof that William's techniques for creating persistent possession worked as designed. The Funtime animatronics construction incorporated remnant from the beginning, explaining why they demonstrate such sophisticated consciousness and planning capabilities even before Elizabeth's soul possesses Circus Baby. The animatronics were built with remnant already integrated into their systems, making them predisposed toward developing awareness and agency beyond normal programming. When Elizabeth died inside Circus Baby, her soul found machinery already saturated with the substance that makes possession possible, allowing her consciousness to merge with baby systems more completely than might have occurred with standard animatronics. This preloaded remnant might explain the behavioral differences between the Funtime animatronics and earlier possessed machines. The children haunting the animatronics at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza demonstrate confusion and rage, attacking night guards indiscriminately because they can't distinguish between William and random security personnel. But the Funtime animatronics show strategic thinking, coordinated planning, and sophisticated understanding of human psychology. That enhanced capability might result from their construction incorporating remnant from inception, creating vessels optimized for possession rather than forcing souls into machinery never designed to house consciousness. William's ultimate goals regarding remnant remain ambiguous, but suggestions throughout the lore point toward immortality research. He's not just studying possession out of academic curiosity or trying to create weaponized animatronics. He's trying to understand consciousness transfer in ways that could allow him to transcend biological death, to move his own consciousness into vessels that wouldn't age or deteriorate. The scooper injecting remnant into bodies, living or dead, might be testing whether human flesh could be preserved and animated beyond natural lifespan. whether the same principles that let children's souls haunt animatronics could let William haunt his own enhanced corpse. This research thread culminates in William's eventual fate across the franchise, where he becomes Springtrap and later Scraptrap, his consciousness bound to a decaying animatronic suit after a spring lock failure that should have killed him permanently. William's survival of that incident, his persistence as a haunted animatronic for decades afterward, demonstrates that his remnant research eventually paid dividends. He achieved the immortality he'd been pursuing, though in a form that probably wasn't his preferred outcome. Trapped in a rotting suit, conscious but imprisoned, aware but powerless to escape the machine that's become his body. Sister Location occupies a crucial position in this research timeline, representing the point where William's understanding of Remnant had advanced enough to create tools like the modified scooper, but before he'd successfully applied that understanding to himself. The facility demonstrates his capabilities at their height, shows what he could build when resources were unlimited and oversight was minimal, and Michael's transformation into a living corpse proves the effectiveness of William's techniques. Remnant injection can preserve consciousness in dead tissue, can maintain motor function despite complete absence of biological processes, can create a state where death becomes transition rather than termination. That proof came at the cost of William's son, making Michael an unwitting test subject in his father's immortality experiments. Whether William specifically intended for Michael to undergo this transformation or whether it was an unexpected outcome of Michael's scooping is unclear, but either interpretation reinforces William's monstrosity. If he intended it, then he sacrificed his son deliberately to test Remnant's effects on human bodies. If it was unintended, then he created conditions where Michael's transformation was possible, and didn't intervene to prevent it, treating his son's fate as acceptable collateral damage in research that mattered more than family. Michael's existence as a remnant animated corpse creates unique philosophical and ethical questions that the game doesn't attempt to answer. Is Michael still human if his body is dead and only remnant keeps him conscious? Does he experience pain, emotion, sensation in the same ways living people do? Can consciousness persisting in dead tissue be considered genuine continuation of personhood? Or has Michael become something else entirely? A ghost piloting his own corpse, functionally similar to the children possessing animatronics? These questions matter because they determine how we understand Michael's continued existence and whether his hunt for William represents human agency or something stranger. The game treats Michael as continuous with his pre-death self, despite the physical transformation. His voice in the final monologue carries determination and personality, suggesting his consciousness hasn't fragmented or been fundamentally altered by the experience of dying and continuing to exist. He remembers who he was, understands what happened to him, and maintains enough sense of self to pursue goals across extended time frames. This continuity suggests that Remnant preserves more than just basic consciousness. It maintains personality, memory, and identity in ways that make the possessed being recognizably the same person despite their body's death. But that preservation comes with costs the game only hints at. Michael's purple corpse must be deeply uncomfortable to inhabit. Dead flesh that doesn't heal or renew itself, nervous system that probably doesn't function normally, sensory experience that might be fundamentally different from what living people experience. He can't eat or sleep in any normal sense. He doesn't age or require medical care. His existence has been reduced to pure consciousness and purpose. Everything else stripped away by the remnant, binding him to dead tissue. That reduction might be liberation from biological needs, or it might be its own form of torture. Being trapped in a body that should be dead but won't stop moving. Awareness that can't be escaped through sleep or death or any natural end. Remnant technology represents William's ultimate expression of his worldview. Consciousness is just another system to be understood, manipulated, and controlled. Bodies are vessels. Death is a technical problem with technical solutions, and the boundaries separating life from death are permeable enough that sufficient understanding and proper tools can bypass them entirely. This reductionist approach strips away the metaphysical and spiritual dimensions of existence, treating consciousness as though it's fundamentally mechanical rather than mysterious, and that reduction enables William to do things that respect for consciousness's ineffable nature would prevent. Sister Location demonstrates remnant at work without explaining it fully, showing us effects without revealing complete mechanisms. Michael survives death through remnant injection. The Funtime animatronics demonstrate enhanced consciousness, possibly due to remnant integration in their construction. The facility contains infrastructure for collecting, storing, and deploying remnant in ways that suggest industrial-scale operations, but the substance itself remains mysterious. Its source unclear, its nature ambiguous, its limitations uncertain. We know it works. We don't know why it works or what constraints govern its function. That partial knowledge creates the same dynamic as the private room's revelations. Enough information to understand the immediate horror, insufficient information to fully comprehend its scope or implications. Remnant makes possession possible, makes Michael's survival possible, makes William's eventual immortality possible. But understanding remnant mechanically doesn't answer deeper questions about whether consciousness bound by remnant is the same as consciousness existing naturally, whether the souls trapped in animatronics experience their existence as continuous with their living selves, whether Michael's remnant animated corpse houses the same person who descended into the facility, or something that just believes it's Michael because remnant preserved his memories along with his awareness. These questions hover over Sister Location's ending and every subsequent appearance Michael makes in the franchise. You're watching someone who died continue existing through technology his father developed. Someone who shouldn't be possible but undeniably is possible. Someone whose very existence proves that the boundaries we assume separate life from death can be bypassed through sufficiently sophisticated understanding of consciousness and will. And that proof, that walking corpse, pursuing his father through decades, represents both triumph and tragedy. Triumph because Michael survived. Tragedy because survival means existing forever in a state that might be worse than death would have been. Chapter 11. The Illusion of Choice and the Architecture of Inevitability. Sister Location structures its gameplay around a sequence of choices that create the illusion of agency while actually funneling players toward a predetermined outcome. Each night presents situations where you must decide how to respond to threats, which instructions to follow, when to hide and when to move. These choices feel meaningful in the moment. Follow baby's advice or try a different strategy. Administer controlled shocks when hand unit suggests or attempt to complete tasks without them. Navigate through Ballora Gallery slowly or risk faster movement. But every choice that keeps you alive, every decision that allows progression to the next night, ultimately brings you closer to the scooping room and the betrayal waiting there. This design philosophy reflects the game's thematic core. Michael never had control over what happened to him in the facility. The appearance of choice, the sense that survival depends on clever decisions and skilled execution, masks the reality that the outcome was determined before the first night began. Baby had already planned the manipulation. The other animatronics were already coordinating with her. The facility's systems were already designed to process technicians through specific sequences that would condition trust and dependency. Michael's choices determined how long he survived and which specific threats he encountered, but they never determined whether he'd eventually reach the scooping room. That destination was inevitable from the moment he entered the elevator. The gameplay mechanics reinforced this inevitability through careful steps that teaches you to trust Baby's voice. Night 1 establishes her as your ally, with gentle guidance that keeps you safe. Night 2 rewards following her instructions, with survival through Ballora Gallery and parts and service, situations where deviation from her directions would likely result in death. Night 3 deepens emotional connection through her tragic backstory. Night 4 demonstrates her ability to help you even in dire circumstances, guiding you through the breaker room sequence while Minarina's swarm. By Night 5, you've been conditioned through repeated positive reinforcement to treat Baby's voice as reliable authority, to follow her instructions without significant hesitation. That conditioning represents the game teaching you to participate in your own destruction, gradually training you to make the specific choice, following Baby to the scooping room, that results in Michael's death. Players can technically refuse to follow Baby's directions, can stand in the elevator or office and simply not progress, but refusing to engage with the game's objectives means refusing to play the game at all, creating a strange situation where the only way to avoid the trap is to stop playing before you've understood that a trap exists. Most players naturally progress, following instructions that have consistently proven reliable, and discover only after the scooper activates that every night of trust was preparation for this betrayal. This meta-textual dimension makes Sister Location's horror extend beyond the game's narrative into the player's relationship with gaming conventions themselves. Games teach us that listening to helpful NPCs leads to success, that following quest objectives moves us toward victory, that survival depends on executing the strategies the game teaches us. Sister Location weaponizes those learned behaviors, uses our trained responses against us, and creates a situation where playing the game correctly by conventional standards means walking directly into the one outcome you should have been trying to avoid. The game punishes you for being a good player, for trusting the systems that previous games taught you to trust. The architectural design of the facility supports this inevitability through spatial constraints that limit movement options. You can't simply refuse to enter Ballora Gallery. Hand Unit assigns tasks that require going there, and refusing tasks means refusing to progress. You can't avoid Circus Baby's gallery or parts and service or the scooping room if you want to complete the nights. The facility's layout funnels you through specific spaces in specific sequences, ensuring that every player experiences the same key moments, regardless of individual decision-making. This creates a uniformity of experience that makes Baby's manipulation universal. Every player will encounter her voice at the same points, receive the same guidance, develop the same conditioned trust. The elevator itself functions as a perfect metaphor for this constrained agency. You can press buttons, call the elevator to different floors, decide when to enter and exit, but the elevator only goes where the facility allows it to go, only stops at designated floors, and ultimately can only carry you deeper into the underground structure or back to the surface. You control the timing and immediate direction, but the overall trajectory, descending into danger and hopefully ascending back to safety, remains predetermined by the facility's design. Your choices happen within parameters William established when he built the place, making even successful escapes part of an architecture that anticipated and accommodated your resistance. This deterministic structure reflects a broader theme about how William's creations function. The animatronics seem to have autonomy and agency, making choices about when to hunt and how to pursue their objectives, but they're operating according to programming William installed, responding to triggers and conditions he defined, pursuing goals that serve his research, regardless of whether those goals align with the animatronics' own desires. Circus Baby's plan to escape using Michael's body seems like genuine agency. She conceived the strategy, coordinated with other animatronics, executed the plan across 5 nights. But that plan only worked because William built the facility to make such escape attempts possible, because he installed the scooper with remnant injection capabilities, because he created circumstances where his daughter's soul would possess an animatronic and develop the intelligence necessary to orchestrate sophisticated manipulation. Even Baby's betrayal of Michael serves William's research by providing data about remnants' effects on human bodies. Whether William specifically intended that outcome is unclear, but his creation of conditions where it could occur means he bears responsibility, regardless of intent. William built a machine that would make his daughter want to escape. He gave her the intelligence to plan that escape. He provided the tools she'd need to execute her plan, and he created surveillance capabilities that would let him observe the outcome. The entire facility functions as an experiment where the subjects believe they're acting independently while actually following parameters the experimenter established. This raises uncomfortable questions about agency and determinism throughout Sister Location's narrative. Did Michael choose to come to the facility, or did William create circumstances that made that choice inevitable? Did Baby choose to manipulate Michael, or was that manipulation a predictable outcome of her imprisonment and capabilities? Did the other animatronics choose to coordinate with Baby's plan, or were they simply responding to programming and circumstance in the only ways their construction allowed? The game never answers these questions definitively, leaving space for interpretation while suggesting that the distinction between genuine choice and sophisticated programming might be less clear than we'd prefer. The player experiences this ambiguity directly through gameplay that feels like it requires constant decision-making while actually offering very limited real choice. You choose when to administer controlled shocks, but the game makes clear that shocking the animatronics is necessary for progression. You choose how quickly to move through Ballora Gallery, but moving too quickly results in death, and moving too slowly eventually triggers time-based failures. You choose whether to trust Baby's voice, but distrusting her means either refusing to progress or attempting strategies the game hasn't taught you. And that probably won't work. Your choices exist, but they're choices within a framework designed to make certain decisions feel inevitable. This design philosophy creates an experience where replaying the game with knowledge of the betrayal doesn't significantly change outcomes. You can't save Michael even knowing what's coming because the game's structure requires you to reach the scooping room to see the ending. You can't avoid Baby's manipulation because trusting her is mechanically reinforced as the correct survival strategy until the moment it becomes the mechanism of your death. You can't escape the underground facility without first walking deeper into it. Can't win without losing. Can't finish the game without accepting the betrayal you now know is coming. That paradox, knowing you're walking into a trap but being unable to avoid it if you want to complete the game, mirrors Michael's situation with disturbing precision. By the end of Night 4, Michael probably understands on some level that something is wrong, that Baby's helpfulness seems too convenient, that the facility's dangers are orchestrated rather than random, but he's invested now, committed to whatever he came to the facility to accomplish. And turning back means abandoning objectives that matter more than his growing unease. So he continues forward, following Baby's voice toward the scooping room, making choices that feel like choices, while actually following a script written long before he arrived. The game's refusal to provide alternate endings reinforces this theme of inevitability. Some games offer multiple outcomes based on player choices or success at optional challenges. Sister Location has one main ending. Michael gets scooped, Ennard uses his body to escape, Michael survives and begins hunting his father. You can unlock additional content through Custom Night and access the private room, but those additions don't change what happened during the main campaign. Michael's fate is fixed, predetermined by the narrative structure, and playing the game means experiencing that fate regardless of skill or decision-making. This deterministic approach might feel frustrating from a pure gameplay perspective. Why give players apparent choices if those choices don't affect outcomes? But thematically, it's perfect. Sister Location is about what happens when you're trapped in systems designed by someone who anticipated your responses, when you're operating an infrastructure that channels your decisions toward predetermined outcomes, when the appearance of agency masks the reality of constraint. Making the gameplay reflect that experience rather than contradicting it creates coherence between what the game is about and how it plays, unifying form and content in ways that make the betrayal more impactful. When the scooper activates, when you realize that every choice you made was simultaneously real and meaningless, the horror comes from recognizing that this is how systems of control actually function. They don't remove agency overtly. They shape environments and incentives and information flow in ways that make certain choices feel rational, while making resistance feel impossible or counterproductive. William built a facility that would make technicians trust Baby because trusting her increased survival chances. Baby built a manipulation that would make Michael follow her to the scooping room because following her had consistently been the correct decision. And you, the player, followed instructions. That felt like they were helping you win because games have taught you that following helpful NPCs' advice is how you win. Everyone made choices. None of those choices mattered as much as the architecture determining which choices would be available and how those choices would be framed. That's the horror Sister Location captures more effectively than any jump scare or chase sequence, the recognition that you can make all the right decisions and still lose because someone designed the game so that all the right decisions lead exactly where they wanted you to go. Chapter 12. Why This Story Refuses to End. Michael Afton's final words in Sister Location promised pursuit of his father, and that promise echoes through multiple subsequent games as Michael appears or is implied in various locations and time periods. His status as a remnant animated corpse makes him uniquely suited for this extended hunt. He can't age or die, can survive environments and situations that would kill living people, and has literally decades to pursue someone who might also be undead or in hiding. But Michael's persistence represents more than just practical capability. It reflects the specific kind of wound Sister Location inflicts. A betrayal and loss so profound that simple survival isn't enough. Michael needs resolution, needs to confront his father, needs to force William to acknowledge everything his ambitions cost the family they both belong to. This need for resolution drives the emotional engine that powers Pizzeria Simulator, where Michael eventually creates circumstances that gather all the remaining animatronics, including Scrap Baby containing Elizabeth's soul and Scrap Trap containing William's consciousness, into a single location where Henry Emily's final trap can destroy them all simultaneously. That ending represents the culmination of Michael's hunt, the moment where everything Sister Location set in motion reaches its conclusion. But understanding why that conclusion feels necessary requires examining what Sister Location did to Michael that makes revenge or peace or whatever he's seeking feel like the only viable endpoint. The scooping destroyed Michael's body while preserving his consciousness, creating existence defined by permanent physical damage and disconnection from normal human experience. He can't form relationships with living people because his corpse's appearance would trigger horror and investigation. He can't pursue conventional goals like career or family because dead bodies don't get employed or start families. His entire existence has been reduced to a single purpose: find William, confront him, make him answer for Elizabeth's death and Michael's scooping and the crying child's death, and every other crime William committed against his family. That narrowing of purpose transforms Michael from person into force, from character with complex motivations into avatar of vengeance or justice or grief that's had decades to calcify into obsession. He's not trying to build a new life after Sister Location's events. He's trying to end the old life, to close accounts that should have been closed when William first started murdering children, but instead were left open through William's refusal to stop or face consequences. Michael becomes the consequence William couldn't avoid, the debt that doesn't expire, the one witness who won't die, or give up or be silenced through any means William possesses. This dynamic makes their eventual confrontation about more than just protagonist versus antagonist or hero versus villain. It's the accumulation of family trauma reaching critical mass, the point where continued avoidance becomes impossible and everything that's been buried must surface. Michael represents everyone William hurt, everyone his ambitions consumed, every victim whose death should have made William stop, but instead just proved that stopping wasn't part of his psychology. And William represents everything that destroyed Michael's family and life and body, everything that should answer for its crimes, but has consistently escaped through cleverness or chance, or the fundamental injustice of a universe that doesn't guarantee consequences for evil. Sister Location creates this confrontation's emotional stakes by showing us exactly what William's infrastructure does to people who enter it. Michael isn't an abstract victim. We experienced his manipulation through Baby's voice, felt the false security her guidance created, participated in the trust that made betrayal possible. When the scooper activates, when Michael dies on that examination table, it's not just a plot point or narrative beat. It's the culmination of hours of gameplay that conditioned us alongside Michael to believe Baby was helping, that following her voice would lead to survival rather than death. The betrayal hits harder because we were betrayed alongside Michael, trusted where we shouldn't have, walked willingly into the trap we should have seen coming. That shared experience makes Michael's promise to find his father resonate as player motivation, not just character motivation. We watched William's machine kill someone we'd been inhabiting for 5 nights. We saw the facility William built and the horrors it enabled. We understand viscerally why Michael can't just walk away, can't accept what happened and try to move on. Something was taken that can't be restored, damage inflicted that can't be repaired, and the only path forward runs directly through confrontation with the man responsible. But Sister Location also plants doubts about whether confrontation will provide what Michael seeks. Can William be held accountable in any meaningful sense? He's probably also a remnant animated corpse by the time Michael catches up to him, trapped in Springtrap's suit, experiencing his own version of undead existence. What does accountability look like when both parties have transcended mortality? When punishment can't involve imprisonment or execution because neither will work on people who are already technically dead? Michael can destroy William's body, but that might just free his consciousness to possess something else. Michael can condemn William verbally, but William has demonstrated complete lack of remorse or moral awareness that would make those condemnations land with any weight. The most Michael can achieve is forcing William to stop creating new victims, preventing future children from experiencing what Elizabeth, Michael, and the crying child experienced. That prevention takes the form of destruction, burning the facility in Pizzeria Simulator, eliminating the remnant saturated animatronics, reducing William's accumulated research and infrastructure to ash. It's not justice in any restorative sense. It's just stopping the ongoing harm, making sure William's evil dies with him, rather than continuing indefinitely through machines and blueprints and techniques he developed. This limited form of victory reflects Sister Location's broader themes about the persistence of evil and the difficulty of undoing harm once it's been created. You can destroy the Funtime animatronics, but that doesn't resurrect Elizabeth or restore Michael's body or erase the deaths William caused before building Circus Baby. You can burn the underground facility, but the knowledge William gained from his experiments still exists in whatever notes or memories survive. You can kill William himself, but the architectural approaches he pioneered, hiding horror behind legitimate business, industrializing murder, creating infrastructure that channels people toward predetermined outcomes, remain available for anyone twisted enough to implement them. Sister Location refuses easy resolution because the horror it depicts doesn't have easy resolution. William's crimes created irreversible consequences, transformed people into things that can't be transformed back, and set in motion cycles of harm that continue generating victims long after the initial perpetrator has been stopped. Michael survives the scooping, but survives as a corpse, gaining immortality he never wanted in exchange for everything that made life valuable. Elizabeth escapes the underground facility, but escapes inside Ennard, merged with other animatronics, her individuality compromised by the collective consciousness she's been forced into. The Funtime animatronics achieve freedom, but achieve it through murdering Michael and wearing his body, becoming perpetrators themselves in the process of escaping William's perpetration. Everyone is simultaneously victim and perpetrator, damaged and damaging, trapped in cycles where the harm done to them generates harm they inflict on others. Baby manipulates and kills Michael, not because she's inherently evil, but because years of imprisonment and trauma created desperation that made manipulation seem necessary. Michael hunts his father not because vengeance is virtuous, but because his transformation into a living corpse leaves him no other purpose, no other path forward except pursuit of the person responsible. William creates horror not because some external force compelled him, but because something in his psychology values knowledge and accomplishment more than human welfare, making evil feel like achievement. This ambiguity about moral culpability, about where victimhood ends and perpetration begins, makes Sister Location's story more disturbing than narratives with clear heroes and villains. We're sympathetic to Baby's desire for freedom while being horrified by her methods. We understand Michael's need for resolution, while questioning whether his hunt serves genuine purpose or just perpetuates cycles of harm. We recognize that William is fundamentally responsible for everything that happens, while also seeing how his creations develop agency that makes them independently dangerous beyond his direct control. The game refuses to resolve these tensions into comfortable categories, leaving players with the recognition that harm creates complexity that can't be undone through punishment or destruction alone. The best Michael can achieve is preventing future harm, stopping William before he creates more victims. But that prevention doesn't heal the victims William already created, doesn't restore the families he destroyed, doesn't undo the decades of suffering his machines inflicted. It just stops things from getting worse, draws a line and says no further, and accepts that everything before that line has to be carried forward, because no amount of vengeance or justice can make it disappear. Sister Location's story refuses to end because the trauma it depicts doesn't end through resolution or catharsis. Trauma persists, reshapes lives around its presence, creates ongoing consequences that ripple forward through years and generations. Michael will carry his scooping and transformation forever, existing in a body that should be dead but continues moving through remnant's intervention. Elizabeth will carry her death inside Circus Baby forever, unable to escape the machine that killed her even after that machine's shell has been destroyed and rebuilt multiple times. William will carry his crimes forever, though whether he experiences them as crimes or as accomplishments remains ambiguous, and the facility will remain underground forever, its rooms empty but intact, its architecture preserved in the absence of anyone coming to demolish it. The scooping room waits in darkness with its remnant injecting apparatus still functional, still ready to process whatever bodies might be brought there. The galleries that house the Funtime animatronics remain structurally sound even after their former occupants have escaped or been destroyed. The surveillance systems might still be recording empty corridors, documenting nothing, waiting for power that might never return. That persistence of infrastructure after the people who used it have moved on or died or been destroyed represents sister location's most haunting implication. Some horrors can't be ended because they're embedded in architecture, encoded in designs, preserved in places that outlast their creators. You can stop William. You can destroy the animatronics, but the underground facility remains, the blueprints exist, the knowledge has been demonstrated, and the potential for someone else to discover and continue the work hovers as a permanent background threat that no amount of vigilance can permanently eliminate. Michael's hunt for William represents an attempt to create closure where closure might not be possible, to force an ending on a story that by its nature resists endings. And that impossible mission, that pursuit of resolution that might always remain one step ahead of him, captures something profoundly true about trauma and harm and the difficulty of recovering from violations that fundamentally alter who you are. Sometimes the only path forward is continuing to walk, knowing that arrival might never happen, but recognizing that movement itself serves as purpose, when purpose becomes the only thing keeping you going. Sister Location ends with Michael walking away from the camera toward an uncertain future, a purple corpse animated by remnant and determination, heading out to find his father. The screen fades to black. The credits roll, and we're left with the knowledge that this ending isn't an ending at all. It's the beginning of a hunt that will span years, or decades, a confrontation that won't happen until Pizzeria Simulator brings everyone back together, a story that refuses to resolve because the wounds it depicts can't fully heal. That refusal to provide closure, to tie up loose ends and deliver catharsis, makes Sister Location one of the franchise's most effective horror entries. It doesn't just scare you with animatronics jumping from darkness, it disturbs you by showing infrastructure that enables horror, by depicting family trauma that destroys everyone involved, by creating situations where every choice is bad and every outcome hurts someone, and then it sends you back into the world, carrying that disturbance, knowing that somewhere in the timeline, Michael is still walking, still hunting, still pursuing the father who built the machine that destroyed him. The story continues because the harm continues, and the harm continues because William built systems that outlast their creator, creating possibilities for evil that persist, even after the original evil has been stopped. That's the real horror Sister Location captures. Not the moment of violence, but its aftermath. Not the initial wound, but the decades spent living with damage that can't fully heal. Not the crime itself, but the recognition that some crimes are so profound they reshape reality around them, creating new normals that can never return to what existed before.